Chapter 9. The plateau, extending almost all the way to the distant mountain peaks, greyish-blue in the fog, was like an actual stone sea, here undulating in a hump or a ridge, there bristling with the sharp fangs of reefs. The impression was enhanced by shipwrecks, dozens of wrecks, of galleys, galleasses, cogs, caravels, brigs, hulks, and longships. Some of them looked as though they had ended up there not long before. Others were piles of barely recognizable planks and ribs, clearly having lain there for decades, if not centuries. Some of the ships were lying keel up. Others, turned over on their sides, looked as though they had been tossed up by devilish squalls and storms. Still others gave the impression they were sailing, making away amidst that stone ocean. They stood even and straight, the chests of their figureheads proudly stuck out, their masts pointing to the zenith, the remains of sails, shrouds, and stays fluttering. They even had their own ghostly crews. Skeletons jammed between rotten planks and entangled in ropes. Dead sailors, busy forever with endless navigation. Flocks of black birds flew up, cawing from the masts, yards, ropes, and skeletons, alarmed by the appearance of the rider, frightened by the clack of hooves. For a moment they flecked the sky, circled in a flock over the edge of the cliff, at the bottom of which lay a lake as grey and smooth as quicksilver. On the edge could be seen a dark and gloomy stronghold, whose towers partly overlooked the graveyard of ships and were partly suspended over the lake, with its bastions embedded in the vertical rock. Kelpie danced, snorted, and pricked up her ears, alarmed by the wrecks, the skeletons, at the whole landscape of death, at the cawing black birds which had already returned, alighting again on the broken masts and cross-trees, on the shrouds and sculls. But if anyone ought to have been afraid there, it was the rider. "Easy, Kelpie," said Ciri in a changed voice. "It's the end of the road. This is the right place and the right time." She found herself outside a gate, God knows how, and emerged like an apparition from between the wrecks. The guards at the foot of the gate noticed her first, alarmed by the cawing of rooks, and now shouted, gesticulating and pointing at her, calling others. When she rode to the gatehouse, there was already a crush there, an excited hubbub. They were all staring at her. The few who knew her and had seen her before, like Boreas Munn and Dacre Siliphant, and the considerably more numerous of them who had only heard about her, newly recruited soldiers from Skellen, mercenaries and ordinary marauders from Ebbing and the surroundings, who were now looking in amazement at the ashen-haired girl with the scar on her face and the sword on her back, at the splendid black mare holding her head high and snorting, her horseshoes ringing on the flagstones of the courtyard. The hubbub died down. It became very quiet. The mare trotted, lifting her legs like a ballerina, her horseshoes ringing like a hammer on an anvil. This went on for a long time before her way was finally barred by crossed guisarmes and ranceurs. Someone reached out a hesitant and frightened hand towards the bridle. The mare snorted. "Take me to the lord of this castle," the girl said confidently. Boreas Munn, not knowing himself why he was doing it, held her stirrup steady and offered his hand. Others held the stamping and snorting mare. "Do you recognize me, my lady?" Boreas asked softly. "For we've already met." "Where?" "On the ice." She looked him straight in the eye. "I didn't look at your face then, sir," she said unemotionally. "You were the lady of the lake." He nodded seriously. "Why have you come here, girl? What for?" "For Yennefer, and to claim my destiny." "Claim your death, more like," he whispered. "This is Sticker Castle. In your place, I'd flee as far from here as you can." She looked again, and Boreas at once understood what she meant to say with that look. Stefan Skellen appeared, He watched the girl for a long time, his arms crossed on his chest. Finally, he indicated with an energetic gesture that she was to follow him. She went without a word, escorted on all sides by armed men. "A strange wench," muttered Boreas, and shuddered. "Fortunately, she is in our concern now," said Dacre Siliphant. "And I'm surprised at you for talking to her like that. It was she, the witch, who killed Vargas and Fripp, and later Ola Harsheim. Tawny Owl killed Harsheim." Boreas cut him off. "Not she. She spared our lives there on the pack ice, though she could have slaughtered and drowned us like pups. All of us. Tawny Owl too." "Very well." Dacre spat on the flags of the courtyard. "He'll reward her for that mercy, together with the sorcerer and Bonhart. You'll see, man. Now they'll gut her ceremonially. They'll flay her in thin strips." "I'm inclined to believe they'll flay her," snapped Boreas, "because they're butchers. And we ain't no better, since we serve under them. And do we have a choice? We don't." One of Skelen's mercenaries suddenly cried softly, and another followed suit. One man swore, another gasped. Someone pointed silently. As far as the eye could see, black birds were sitting on the battlements, on the corbels, on the roofs of the towers, on the cornices, on the windowsills and gables, on the gutters and on the gargoyles and mascarons. They had flown from the ship's graveyard noiselessly, without cawing, and now they were sitting in silence, waiting. "They scent death," mumbled one of the mercenaries. "And carrion," added a second. "We don't have a choice," Siliphant repeated mechanically, looking at Boreas. Boreas Munn looked at the birds. "Perhaps it's time we did," he replied softly. They climbed a great staircase with 3 landings, walked along a long corridor between an avenue of statues set in niches, and passed through a cloister surrounding a vestibule. Ciri walked boldly, feeling no anxiety. Neither the weapons nor her escort's murderous visages caused her fear. She had lied, saying she couldn't remember the faces of the men from the frozen lake. She did remember. She remembered seeing Stefan Skelen, the same man now leading her with a gloomy expression deeper into that huge, awful castle, as he shook, teeth chattering on the ice. Now, as he looked around and glared at her from time to time, she sensed he was still a little afraid of her. She breathed more deeply. They entered a hall beneath a high star vault supported on columns beneath great spidery chandeliers. Ciri saw who was waiting there for her. Fear dug its claw-like fingers into her guts, clenched its fist, tugged and twisted. Bonhart was by her in 3 strides. He grabbed her by the front of her jerkin, lifted her up, and pulled her towards him at the same time, bringing her face closer to his pale, fishy eyes. "Hell must indeed be dreadful," he roared, "if you've chosen me." She didn't reply. She could smell alcohol on his breath. "And maybe hell didn't want you, you little beast. Perhaps that devilish tower spat you out in disgust after tasting your venom." He drew her closer. She turned aside and drew back her face. "You're right," he said softly. "You're right to be afraid. It's the end of your road. You won't escape from here. Here, in this castle, I'll bleed you dry." "Have you finished, Mr. Bonhart?" She knew at once who had spoken. The sorcerer Vilgefortz, who first of all had been a prisoner in manacles and afterwards pursued her in the Tower of the Gull. He had been very handsome then, on the island. Now something in his face had changed, something that made it ugly and fearful. "Mr. Bonhart!" The sorcerer didn't even move on his throne-like armchair. "Let me assume the pleasant duty of welcoming to Stigger Castle our guest, Miss Cyrilla of Sintra, the daughter of Pavetta, the granddaughter of Calanthe, the descendant of the famous Lara Dorinep Shahadal. Greetings. Please come closer." The derision, hidden beneath the mask of civility, slipped out from the sorcerer's last words. There was nothing but a threat and order in them. Ciri felt at once that she would be unable to resist that order. She felt fear. Ghastly fear.
"Closer!"
hissed Vilgefortz. Now she noticed what was wrong with his face. His left eye, considerably smaller than his right, blinked, flickered, and spun around like a mad thing in the wrinkled grey-blue eye socket. The sight was gruesome.
"A brave pose. A trace of fear in the face,"
said the sorcerer, tilting his head.
"My acknowledgements. Assuming your courage doesn't result from stupidity, I shall dispel any possible fantasies at once. You will not escape from here, as Mr. Bonhart correctly observed, neither by teleportation nor with the help of your own special abilities."
She knew he was right. Previously, she had persuaded herself that if it came to it, she would always, even at the last moment, be able to flee and hide amidst times and places. Now she knew that was an illusory hope, a fantasy. The castle positively vibrated with strange, evil, hostile magic, and that magic was pervading, penetrating her. It crawled like a parasite over her innards, repulsively slithering over her brain. She could do nothing about it. She was in her enemy's power, helpless. Too bad, she thought. I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was coming here for. The rest was really just fantasy. May what has to happen, happen.
"Well done," said Vilgefortz. "An accurate assessment of the situation. What must happen will happen. Or, more precisely, what I decide will happen. I wonder if you're also guessing, my splendid one, what I shall decide."
She was about to answer, but before she could overcome the resistance of her tight, dry throat, he anticipated her by reading her thoughts.
"Of course, you know. Master of worlds. Master of times and places. Yes, my splendid one. Your visit didn't surprise me. Quite simply, I know where you escaped to from the lake and how you did it. I know how you got here. The one thing I don't know is, was it a long way? And did it provide you with many thrills? Oh!"
He smiled nastily, anticipating her once again.
"You don't have to reply. I know it was interesting and exciting. You see, I can't wait to try it myself. I'm very envious of your talent. You'll have to share it with me, my splendid one. Yes, have to are the right words. Until you share your talent with me, I simply won't let you out of my hands. I won't let you out of my hands, neither by day nor by night."
Ciri finally understood it wasn't only fear squeezing her throat. The sorcerer was gagging and choking her magically. He was mocking her, humiliating her, in front of everyone. "Let Yennefer go." She coughed so hard, she arched her back with the effort. "Let her go, and you can do what you want with me." Bonhart roared with laughter, and Stefan Skellen also laughed dryly. Vilgefortz poked the corner of his gruesome eye with his little finger.
"You can't be so slow-witted not to know that I can do what I want with you in any case. Your offer is pompous, and that's pathetic and ridiculous."
"You need me." She raised her head, although it cost her an enormous amount of strength. "To have a child with me. Everybody wants that. You too. Yes, I'm in your power. I came here by myself. You didn't catch me. although you pursued me through half the world. I came here by myself, and I'm giving myself up to you for Yennefer, for her life. Is it so ridiculous to you? So try using violence and force with me. You'll see. You'll be over your desire to laugh in no time. Bonhart leapt at her and swung his scourge. Vilgefortz made an apparently careless gesture, just a slight movement of the hand, but even that was enough for the whip to fly from the hunter's hand, and he staggered as though hit by a coal wagon.
I see Mr. Bonhart still has difficulty understanding the responsibilities of a guest, said Vilgefortz, massaging his fingers. Try to remember, when one is a guest, one doesn't destroy the furniture or works of art, nor steal small objects, nor does one soil the carpets or inaccessible places. One doesn't rape or beat other guests, the latter two not, at least, until the host has finished raping and beating. Not until he gives the sign that one may now rape and beat. You too, Ciri, ought to be able to draw the appropriate conclusions from what I've said. You can't? I'll help you. You surrender yourself to me and humbly agree to everything. Allow me to do anything I want with you. You think your offer highly generous. You're mistaken. For the matter is that I shall do with you what I have to do, not what I'd like to do. An example. I'd like to gouge out at least one of your eyes as revenge for Thaneth, but I can't, because I'm afraid you wouldn't survive it.
Ciri knew it was now or never. She spun around in a half-turn and jerked Swallow from the scabbard. The entire castle suddenly whirled, and she felt herself falling, painfully banging her knees. She bent over, her forehead almost touching the floor, fighting the urge to vomit. The sword slipped from her numb fingers. Someone lifted her up.
Yes,
Vilgefortz drawled, resting his chin on hands held together as if in prayer.
Where was I? Ah, yes, that's right, your offer. Yennefer's life and freedom in exchange for what? For your voluntary surrender, willingly, without violence or compulsion? I'm sorry, Ciri. Violence and compulsion are simply essential to what I shall do to you.
Yes, yes, he repeated, watching with interest as the girl wheezed, spat, and tried to vomit.
It simply won't happen without violence or compulsion. You would never agree voluntarily to what I shall do to you, I assure you. So, as you must see, your offer, still pathetic and ridiculous, is, furthermore, worthless. So I reject it. Go on, take her to the laboratory at once.
The laboratory didn't differ much from the one Ciri knew from the Temple of Melitele in Elender. It was also brightly lit, clean, with long metal-topped tables laden with glass, large jars, retorts, flasks, test tubes, pipes, lenses, hissing and bubbling alembics, and other strange apparatus. Here also, as in Elender, it smelled strongly of ether, alcohol, formalin, and something else, something that triggered fear. Even in the friendly temple, beside the friendly priestesses and a friendly Yennefer, Ciri had felt fear in the laboratory. And after all, in Elender, no one had dragged her to the laboratory by force. No one had brutally shoved her onto a bench, and no one had held her shoulders and arms in an iron grip. In Elender, there hadn't been a dreadful steel chair whose purpose was quite sadistically obvious. There had been no shaven-headed characters dressed in white in the middle of the laboratory, no Bonhart and no Skellen, excited, flushed and licking his lips. And neither was there Vilgefortz, with one normal eye and the other tiny and twitching hideously. Vilgefortz turned around from the table where he had spent a long time arranging some sinister-looking instruments.
"Do you see, my splendid maiden?" he began,
walking towards her.
that you are the key to mastery and power? Not only over this world, a vanity of vanities doomed in any case to early extinction, but over all worlds, over the whole compass of places and times which have arisen since the conjunction. You certainly understand me. You have already visited some of those places and times. I'm ashamed to admit it, he continued a moment later, rolling up his sleeves, but I'm terribly attracted by power. It's crude, I know, but I want to be a ruler before whom people will bow down, whom people will bless simply because I let them be, and whom they will worship as a god if, let's say, I decide to save their world from a cataclysm, even if I only save it on a whim. Oh, Ciri, my heart is gladdened by the thought of how magnanimously I shall reward the faithful, and how cruelly I shall punish the disobedient and arrogant. The prayers that shall be offered up by whole generations to me and for me, for my love and my mercy, will be balm and honey to my soul. Whole generations, Ciri, whole worlds, listen out. Do you hear? Deliver us from the plague, hunger, war, and wrath of Vilgefortz. He moved his fingers just in front of her face, then violently seized her by the cheeks. Ciri screamed and struggled, but she was held firmly. Her lips began to tremble. Vilgefortz saw it and sniggered. The child of destiny. He laughed nervously, and white flecks of foam appeared at the corners of his mouth. In any here, the sacred elven elder blood. Now, all mine. He straightened up abruptly and wiped his mouth. Various fools and mystics, he now announced in his usually cold tone, have tried to adapt you to fairy tales, legends, and prophecies, have tracked the genes you carry, your inheritance from your ancestors. Mistaking the sky for stars reflected in the surface of a pond, they mystically supposed that a gene determining great potential would continue to evolve, that it would achieve the height of power in your child, or the child of your child, and a charming aura grew around you. Incense smoke trailed behind you. But the truth is much more banal, much more mundane. Organically mundane, I'd say. Your blood, my splendid one, is important, but in the absolutely literal, quite unpoetic sense of the word. He picked up from the table a glass syringe measuring about 6 inches. The syringe ended in a thin, slightly curved capillary. Ciri felt her mouth go dry. The sorcerer examined the syringe under the light. In a moment, he declared coldly, you will be undressed and placed on this chair, precisely this one, which you're contemplating with such curiosity. You'll spend some time in the chair, albeit in an uncomfortable position. With the help of this device, which also, as I see, is fascinating you, you will be impregnated. It won't be so awful, for almost the whole time you'll be befuddled by elixirs, which I shall give you intravenously, with the aim of implanting the fetal ovum properly and ruling out an ectopic pregnancy. You needn't be afraid. I'm skilled. I've done this hundreds of times. Never, admittedly, to a chosen one of fate and destiny, but I don't think the uteruses and ovaries of chosen ones differ so much from those of ordinary mates. And now, the most important thing. Vilgefortz savoured what he was saying. It may worry you, or it may gratify you, but know that you won't give birth to the infant. Who knows? Perhaps it would also have been a great chosen one with extraordinary abilities, the saviour of the world and the king of nations. No one, however, is able to guarantee that, and I, furthermore, have no intention of waiting that long. I need blood. More precisely, placental blood. As soon as the placenta develops, I shall remove it from you. The rest of my plans and intentions, my splendid one, will not, as you now comprehend, concern you. So there's no point informing you about them. It would only be an unnecessary frustration.
He fell silent, leaving a masterly pause. Ciri couldn't control her trembling mouth.
And now,
the sorcerer nodded theatrically,
I invite you to the chair, Miss Cyrilla.
It would be worth having that bitch Yennefer watching this. Bonhart's teeth flashed beneath his grey moustaches. She deserves it.
Indeed she does.
Small white balls of froth appeared again in the corners of Vilgefort's smiling mouth.
Impregnation is, after all, a sacred thing, solemn and ceremonial, a mystery at which one's entire close family should assist. And Yennefer is, after all, your quasi-mother, and in primitive cultures the mother virtually takes an active part in her daughter's consummation ceremony. Go on, bring her here.
But regarding that impregnation, Bonhart bent over Ciri, whom the sorcerer's shaven-headed acolytes had begun to undress. Couldn't one, Lord Vilgefortz, do it more normally, as nature intended? Skellen snorted, nodding his head. Vilgefortz frowned slightly.
No, he responded coolly. No, Mr. Bonhart, one couldn't.
Ciri, as though only now realizing the gravity of the situation, uttered an ear-splitting scream. Once, and then a second time.
Well, well,
the sorcerer grimaced.
We entered the lion's den bravely, with head and sword held high, and now we're afraid of a small glass tube. For shame, young lady.
Ciri, not caring about shame, screamed so loudly the laboratory vessels jingled, and the whole of Stigger Castle suddenly responded with yelling and commotion. "There'll be trouble, boys," repeated Zedalik, scraping dried dung from between the stones of the courtyard with the metal-tipped butt of his ranceur. "Oh, you'll see, there'll be trouble for us poor wretches." He looked at his comrades, but none of the guards commented. Neither did Boreas Munn speak. He had remained with the guards at the gate from choice, not because of orders. He could have, like Siliphant, followed Tawny Owl, could have seen with his own eyes what would happen to the Lady of the Lake, what fate she would suffer. But Boreas didn't want to watch it. He preferred to stay here in the courtyard, beneath the open sky, far from the chambers and halls of the upper castle, where they had taken the girl. He was certain that not even her screams would reach here. "Those blackbirds are a bad sign." Zedalik nodded at the rooks, still sitting on the walls and cornices. "That young wench who came here on the black mare is an evil omen. We're serving Tawny Owl in an evil matter, I tell you. They're saying, in truth, that Tawny Owl himself isn't a coroner or important gentleman now, but an outlaw like us, that the Emperor has it in cruelly for him. If he seizes us all, boys, there'll be trouble for us poor wretches." "Aye, aye," added another guard with long moustaches, wearing a hat decorated with black stork feathers. "The noose is at hand. It's no good when the Emperor's angry."
"Below that,"
interjected a third, a new arrival to Stigger Castle, with the last party of mercenaries recruited by Skellen.
"the Emperor might not have enough time for us. They say he has other concerns. They say there was a decisive battle somewhere in the north. The Nordlings beat the Imperial forces, thrashed them soundly."
"In that case," said a fourth, "perhaps it isn't so bad that we're here with Tawny Owl. Always better to be with the victors."
"No, certainly it's better," said the new one. "Tawny Owl, it seems to me, will go far, and we'll go far with him too."
"Oh, boys," Zedalik leaned on his ranceur, "you're as thick as pig shit." The black birds took flight with a deafening flapping and cawing. They darkened the sky, wheeling in a flock around the bastion.
"What the fuck?" growled one of the guards.
"Open the gate, please."
Boreas Munn suddenly detected a powerful smell of herbs, sage, mint, and thyme. He swallowed and shook his head. He closed and opened his eyes. It didn't help. The thin, grey-haired elderly man, resembling a tax collector who had suddenly appeared beside them, had no intention of vanishing. He stood and smiled through pursed lips. Boreas's hair almost lifted his hat up.
"Open the gate, please," repeated the smiling elderly gentleman. "Without delay. It really will be better if you do."
Zedalik dropped his ranseur with a clank, stood stiffly and moved his mouth noiselessly. His eyes were empty. The remaining men went closer to the gate, striding stiffly and unnaturally like automatons. They took down the bar and opened the hasp and staple. 4 riders burst into the courtyard with a thudding of horseshoes. One had hair as white as snow, and the sword in his hand flashed like lightning. Another was a fair-haired woman, bending a bow as she rode. The 3rd rider, quite a young woman, carved open Zedalik's temple with a sweeping blow of a curved sabre. Boreas Munn picked up the ranseur and shielded himself with a shaft. The 4th rider suddenly towered over him. There were wings of a bird of prey attached to both sides of his helmet. His upraised sword shone.
"Leave him, Kair," said the white-haired man sharply. "Let's save time and blood. Milver, Regis, that way."
"No," mumbled Boreas, not knowing himself why he was doing it.
"Not that way. That's only a dead end. Your way is there, up that staircase, to the upper castle. If you wish to rescue the Lady of the Lake, then you must hurry."
"My thanks," said the white-haired man. "Thank you, stranger. Regis, did you hear? Lead on." A moment later, only corpses remained in the courtyard, and Boreas Munn still leaning on the pikestaff, which he couldn't release because his legs were shaking so much. The rooks circled, cawing over Stigger Castle, covering the towers and bastions in a shroud-like cloud. Vilgefortz listened with stoical calm and an inscrutable expression to the breathless report of the mercenary who had come running, but his restless and blinking eye betrayed him.
"Last-ditch reinforcements,"
He ground his teeth.
"Unbelievable. Things like that don't happen. Or they do, but only in crummy, vulgar pageants, and it comes to the same thing. Do me the pleasure, good fellow, of telling me you've made it all up for, shall we say, a lark?"
"I'm not making it up," the hireling said in indignation. "I'm speaking the truth. Some horsemen have burst in, a whole hasser of them."
Very well, the sorcerer interrupted. "I was joking. Skellen, deal with this matter personally. It will be a chance to demonstrate how much your army, hired with my gold, is worth."
Tawny Owl leapt up, nervously waving his arms.
"Aren't you treating this too lightly, Vilgefortz?" he yelled. "You, it seems, don't realize the gravity of the situation. If the castle is being attacked, it's by Emir's army, and that means
It doesn't mean anything."
The sorcerer cut him off.
"But I know what you have in mind. Very well. If the fact that you have me behind you will improve your morale, have it as you will. Let's go, you too, Mr. Bonhart. As far as you're concerned,"
He fixed his terrible eye on Ciri.
"don't have any false hopes. I know who's turned up here with these pathetic reinforcements worthy of a cheap farce, and I assure you, I shall turn this cheap farce into a nightmare. Hey, you!"
He nodded at the servants and acolytes.
"Shackle the girl into Meritium, lock and bolt her in a cell, and don't move an inch from the door. You'll answer with your lives for her. Understood?"
"Yes, sir."
They rushed into the corridor, and from the corridor into a large hall full of sculptures, a veritable glyptothek. No one barred their way. They only saw a few lackeys who immediately fled on seeing them. They ran up some stairs. Kair kicked a door open. Angoulême rushed inside with a battle cry, and with a blow of her sabre knocked off the helmet of a suit of armour she took for a guard standing by the door. She realized her mistake and roared with laughter.
"Look at that!"
"Angoulême!" Geralt took her to task. "Don't just stand there, go on!" A door opened in front of them. Shapes loomed in the doorway. Milver bent her bow and sent off an arrow without a second thought. Somebody screamed. The door was closed. Geralt heard a bolt thudding. Go on, he shouted. "Don't just stand there." "Witcher," said Regis, "this running is senseless. I'll go off. I'll fly off and do some reconnaissance."
Fly!
The vampire took off as though blown by the wind. Geralt had no time to be surprised. Again, they chanced upon some men, this time armed. Caer and Angoulême jumped towards them with a yell, and the men bolted, mainly, it seemed, because of Caer and his impressive winged helmet. They dashed into the cloister and the gallery surrounding the inner vestibule. Around 20 paces separated them from the portico leading into the castle when shapes appeared on the other side of the cloister. Loud shouts echoed out, and arrows whistled.
Take cover!
The Witcher yelled. Arrows rained down on them. Fletchings fluttered and arrowheads sent up sparks from the floor, chipping the mouldings from the walls and showering them in fine dust.
Get down! Behind the balustrade!
They dropped down, hiding pell-mell behind spiral columns carved with leaves. But they didn't get away with it entirely. The Witcher heard Angoulême cry out and saw as she grabbed her arm, her sleeve, which immediately became blood-soaked.
Angoulême!
"It's nothing. It passed through muscle," the girl shouted back in only a slightly trembling voice, confirming what he had seen. Had the arrowhead shattered the bone, Angoulême would have fainted from the shock. The archers were shooting from the gallery without let-up and were shouting out, calling for reinforcements. Several of them ran off to the side to fire at the pinned-down party from an acute angle. Geralt swore, assessing the distance separating them from the arcade. Things looked bad, but to stay where they were meant death.
Let's make a run for it, he yelled. Ready? Caer, help Angoulême.
They'll slaughter us.
Run for it, we have to.
No, screamed Milva, standing up with bow in hand. She straightened up, assumed a shooting position, a veritable statue, a marble Amazon with a bow. The marksman on the gallery yelled. Milva lowered her head. One of the archers flew backwards, slamming against the wall, and a bloody splash resembling a huge octopus bloomed on the stone. A cry resounded from the gallery, a roar of anger, fury, and horror.
"By the great sun," groaned Caer.
Geralt squeezed his shoulder.
"Let's make a run for it. Help Angoulême."
The marksmen on the gallery directed all their fire at Milva. The archer didn't even twitch, although all around her it was dusty with plaster, chips of marble and splinters of shattering shafts. She calmly released the bowstring. Another yell, and another archer tumbled over like a ragdoll, splashing his companions with blood and brains. "Now!" yelled Geralt, seeing the guards fleeing from the gallery, dropping to the floor, hiding from the deadly arrowheads. Only the three bravest were still shooting. An arrowhead thudded against a pillar, showering Milva in a cloud of plaster dust. The archer blew on her hair, which was falling over her face, and bent her bow.
"Milva!"
Geralt, Angoulême, and Caer had reached the arcade.
"Leave it! Run!"
"One more little shot," said the archer, with the fletching of an arrow in the corner of her mouth. The bowstring slapped. One of the three brave men howled, leaned over the balustrade, and plummeted downwards onto the flags of the courtyard. At the sight, courage immediately deserted the others. They fell to the floor and pressed themselves against it. Those who had arrived were in no hurry to come out onto the gallery and expose themselves to Milva's shooting. With one exception. Milva measured him up at once. Short, slim, swarthy, with a bracer on his left forearm rubbed to a shine and an archer's glove on his right hand. She saw him lift a shapely composite bow with a profiled carved riser, saw him tauten it smoothly. She saw the bowstring, tightened to its full draw, cross his swarthy face, saw the red feathered fletching touch his cheek. She saw him aim carefully. She tossed her bow up, tightened it smoothly, already aiming as she did so. The bowstring touched her face, the feather of the fletching, the corner of her mouth.
"Harder, harder, Marischka. All the way to your cheek. Twist the bowstring with your fingers so the arrow doesn't fall from the rest. Hand tight against your cheek. Aim. Both eyes open. Now hold your breath. Shoot."
The bowstring, in spite of the woolen bracer, stung her left forearm painfully. Her father was about to speak when he was seized by a coughing fit. A heavy, dry, painful coughing fit. "He's coughing worse and worse," thought Marischka Barring, lowering her bow. "More and more horribly, and more often. He started coughing yesterday as he was aiming at a book. and for dinner there was only boiled pigweed. I can't stand boiled pigweed. I hate hunger and poverty. Old Barring sucked in air, wheezing gratingly.
Your arrow passed a span from the bullseye, lass. A whole span. And I've told you, ain't I, not to twitch when you're letting the bowstring go. And you're hopping about like a slug's crawled into your arse crack. And you take too long aiming. You're shooting with a weary arm. That's how you waste arrows.
But I hit the target, and not a span at all, but half a span from the bullseye.
Don't talk back. How the gods punish me by sending me a clod of a lass instead of a son.
I ain't a clod.
We'll soon find out. Shoot one more time, and mark what I told you. You're to stand like you were sunk into the ground. Aim, and shoot swiftly. Why are you making faces?
Because you're bad-mouthing me.
It's my fatherly right. Shoot.
She drew back the bow, sullen and close to tears. He noticed.
I love you, Marishka, he said softly. Always mind that.
She released the bowstring when the fletching had barely touched the corner of her mouth.
Well done, said her father. Well done, lass.
And coughed horribly, wheezingly. The swarthy archer from the gallery died outright. Milver's arrow struck him below his left armpit and penetrated deep, more than halfway up the shaft, shattering his ribs, pulverizing his lungs and heart. The swarthy archer's red feathered arrow, released a split second earlier, struck Milver low in the belly and exited at the back, having shattered her pelvis and pulverized her intestines and arteries. The archer fell to the floor as though rammed. Geralt and Kaia shouted with one voice, heedless that at the sight of Milver's collapse the marksmen from the gallery had once again picked up their bows. They jumped out from the portico protecting them, grabbed the archer and dragged her back, scornful of the hail of arrows. One of the arrowheads rang against Kaia's helmet. Another, Geralt would have sworn, parted his hair. Milver left behind her a broad and glistening trail of blood. In the blink of an eye, a huge pool had appeared in the place they laid her down. Kaia cursed, his hands shaking. Geralt felt despair overcoming him, and fury.
"Auntie!" howled Angoulême. "Auntie! Don't die!"
Maria Barring opened her mouth, coughed horrifyingly, spitting blood onto her chin. "I love you too, Papa," she said quite distinctly, and died. The shaven-headed acolytes couldn't cope with the struggling and yelling Ciri, and lackeys rushed to help them. One, kicked between the legs, leapt back, bent over double, and fell to his knees, grabbing his crotch and gasping spasmodically for air. But that only infuriated the others. Ciri was punched in the neck and slapped in the face. They knocked her over. Someone kicked her hard in the hip, and someone else sat down on her shins. One of the bald acolytes, a young character with evil green and gold eyes, kneeled on her chest, dug his fingers into her hair, and tugged it hard. Ciri howled. The acolyte also howled and goggled. Ciri saw streams of blood gushing from his shaven head, staining his white laboratory coat with a macabre design. The next second, hell broke loose in the laboratory. Overturned furniture banged. The high-pitched cracking and crunching of breaking glass merged with the hellish moaning of people. The decocts, filters, elixirs, extracts, and other magical substances spilling over the tables and floor mixed up and combined, some of them hissing on contact and belching clouds of yellow smoke. The room was instantly filled with a pungent stench. Amidst the smoke, through tears brought on by the smell of burning, Ciri saw to her horror a black shape resembling an enormous bat dashing around the laboratory at an incredible speed. She saw the bat in flight, slashing the men, and saw them falling over, screaming. In front of her eyes, a lackey trying hard to flee was picked up from the floor and flung onto a table, where he thrashed around, splashed blood, and finally croaked among smashed retorts, alembics, test tubes, and flasks. The mixture of spilled liquids splashed onto a lamp. It hissed, stinking, and flames suddenly exploded in the laboratory. A wave of heat dispersed the smoke. She clenched her teeth so as not to scream. A slender, grey-haired man dressed elegantly in black was sitting on the steel chair meant for her. The man was calmly biting and sucking on the neck of the shaven-headed acolyte slumped over his knee. The acolyte squealed shrilly and twitched convulsively, his extended legs and arms jerking rhythmically. Corpse blue flames were dancing on the metal tabletop. Retorts and flasks exploded with a thud one after another. The vampire tore his pointed fangs from the victim's neck and fixed his agate black eyes on Ciri.
"There are occasions," he said in an explanatory tone, licking blood from his lips, "when it's simply impossible not to have a drink. Don't fear." He smiled, seeing her expression. "Don't fear, Ciri. I'm glad I found you. My name's Emil Regis. I am, although it may seem strange to you, a comrade of the Witcher Geralt. I came here with him to rescue you."
An armed mercenary rushed into the blazing laboratory. Geralt's comrade turned his head towards him, hissed and bared his fangs. The mercenary howled horrifyingly. The howling went on for a long time before it faded into the distance. Emil Regis threw the acolyte's body, motionless and soft as a rag, from his knee, stood up and stretched just like a cat.
"Who'd have thought it?" he said. "Just some rent, and what good blood inside him. What hidden talents. Come with me, Cyrilla. I'll take you to Geralt."
"No," mumbled Ciri.
"You don't have to be afraid of me."
"I'm not," she protested, bravely fighting with her teeth, which insisted on chattering. "That's not what it's about. But Yennefer is imprisoned here somewhere. I have to free her as quickly as possible. I'm afraid that Vilgefortz, Mr.
Emil Regis.
Warn Geralt, good sir, that Vilgefortz is here. He's a sorcerer, a powerful sorcerer. Geralt has to be on his guard."
"You're to be on your guard," repeated Regis, looking at Milva's body, "because Vilgefortz is a powerful mage. Meanwhile, she's setting Yennefer free."
Geralt swore. "Come on," he yelled, trying to revive the low spirits of his companions with a shout. "Let's go." "Let's go." Angoulême stood up and wiped away her tears. "Let's go. It's time to kick a few fucking arses."
"I feel such strength inside me, I could probably lay waste to this entire castle,"
hissed the vampire, smiling gruesomely. The Witcher glanced at him suspiciously. "Don't go that far," he said, "but force your way through to the upper floor and make a bit of a racket to draw their attention away from me. I'll try to find Ciri. It wasn't good. It wasn't good, vampire, that you left her alone."
"She demanded it,"
Regis explained calmly, using a tone and attitude that ruled out any discussion.
"She astonished me, I admit."
"I know. Go to the upper floor. Look after yourselves. I'll try to find her or Yennefer." He found her, and quite quickly. He ran into them all of a sudden, completely unexpectedly, coming around a bend in a corridor. He saw, and the sight made the adrenaline prick the veins on the back of his hands. Several lackeys were dragging Yennefer along the corridor. The sorceress was dishevelled and shackled in chains, which didn't stop her kicking and struggling and swearing like a trooper. Geralt didn't let the lackeys get over their astonishment. He only struck once, with one short thrust from the elbow. The man howled like a dog, staggered, smashed his head with a clank and a thud against a suit of plate armour standing in an alcove, and slid down it, smearing blood over the steel plates. The remaining ones, there were 3 of them, released Yennefer and leapt aside, apart from the 4th, who seized the sorceress by the hair and held a knife to her throat just above her demeritium collar. "Don't come any closer," he howled. "I'll slit her throat. I'm not joking." "Neither am I." Geralt swung his sword around and looked the thug in the eyes. That was enough for him. He released Yennefer and joined his companions. All of them were now holding weapons. One of them wrenched an antique but menacing-looking halberd from a panoply on the wall. All of them, crouching, were vacillating between attack and defence. "I knew you'd come," said Yennefer, straightening up proudly. "Geralt, show these scoundrels what a witch's sword can do." She raised her cuffed hands high, tautening the links of the chain. Geralt grasped his scythe in both hands, tilted his head slightly and aimed, and smote. So swiftly, no one saw the movement of the blade. The links fell onto the floor with a clank. One of the servants gasped. Geralt grasped the hilt more tightly and moved his index finger under the crossguard.
Stand still, Yen. Head slightly to one side, please.
The sorceress didn't even flinch. The sound of metal being struck by the sword was very faint. The dimeritium collar fell down beside the manacles. Only a single tiny drop appeared on Yennefer's neck. She laughed, massaging her wrists, and turned towards the lackeys. None of them could endure her gaze. The one with a halberd placed the antique weapon gingerly on the floor, as though afraid it would clank.
Let Tawny Owl, he mumbled, fight someone like that himself. My life is dear to me.
They ordered us, muttered another, withdrawing. They ordered us. We were captive. After all, we weren't rude to you, madam, in your prison. A third licked his lips. Testify to that.
Be gone,
said Yennefer. Freed from the dimeritium manacles, erect, with her head proudly raised, she looked like a titaness. Her unruly black mane seemed to reach up to the vault. The lackeys fled, furtively and without looking back. Having shrunk to her normal dimensions, Yennefer fell on Geralt's neck.
I knew you'd come for me,
she murmured, searching for his mouth with hers.
That you'd come, whatever might happen.
Let's go, he said after a moment, gasping for air. Now for Ciri. Ciri, she said, and a second later, a menacing violet glow lit up in her eyes. And Vilgefortz. A man with a crossbow came around the corner, yelled and shot, aiming at the sorceress. Geralt leapt as though propelled by a spring, brandished his sword, and the deflected bolt flew right over the crossbowman's head, so close he had to crouch. He didn't manage to straighten up, though, for the Witcher leapt forward and filleted him like a carp. Two more were still standing in the corridor, also holding crossbows. They also fired, but their hands were shaking too much to find the target. The next moment, the Witcher was upon them, and they were both dead.
Which way, Yen?
The sorceress focused, closing her eyes. That way, up those stairs.
Are you sure it's the right way?
Yes. They were attacked by thugs just around the bend in the corridor, not far from a portal decorated with an archivolt. There were more than 10 of them, and they were armed with spears, partisans, and corsec. They were even determined and fierce. In spite of that, it didn't take long. Yennefer stabbed one of them in the center of the chest at once with a fiery arrowhead shot from her hand. Geralt whirled in a pirouette and fell among the others, the dwarven Sile flashing and hissing like a snake. Once 4 had fallen, the rest fled, the corridors echoing with their clanking and stamping.
Everything in order, Yen?
Couldn't be better. Vilgefortz stood beneath the archivolt.
I'm impressed, he said calmly and resonantly. I really am impressed, Witcher. You're naive and hopelessly stupid, but your technique is impressive.
Your brigands, Yennefer replied just as calmly, have just beaten a retreat, leaving you at our mercy. Hand Ciri over, and we'll spare your life.
Do you know, Yennefer, that's the second such generous offer I've had today?
The sorcerer grinned.
Thank you. Thank you. And here's my answer.
Look out, yelled Yennefer, jumping aside. Geralt also leapt aside, just in time. The column of fire shooting from the sorcerer's outstretched hands transformed the place they had been standing a moment earlier into black and fizzing mud. The Witcher wiped soot and the remains of his eyebrows off his face. He saw Vilgefortz extend a hand. He dived aside and flattened himself against the floor behind the base of a column. There was a boom so loud it hurt their ears, and the whole castle was shaken to its foundations. Booming echoed through the castle. The walls trembled and the chandeliers jingled. A large oil portrait in a gilded frame fell with a great clatter. The mercenaries who ran up from the vestibule had abject fear in their eyes. Stefan Skellen calmed them with a menacing look and took them to task with his grim expression and voice. "What's going on there? Talk."
"My lord coroner," wheezed one of them. "There's horror there. There's demons and devils there. They're shooting unerringly. It's a massacre. Death is there. It's red with gore everywhere. Some 10 men have fallen, perhaps more. Over yonder. Do you hear, sir?" There was another boom, and the castle shook.
"Magic," muttered Skellen. "Vilgefortz. Well, we shall see. We'll find out who's beating whom."
Another hireling came running. He was pale and covered in plaster. For a long time he couldn't utter a word, and when he finally spoke, his hands trembled and his voice shook.
There's a monster, Lord Coroner, like a great black flittermouse. It was tearing people's heads off before my very eyes. The blood was gushing everywhere, and it was darting around and laughing. It had teeth like this. "We won't escape with our lives," whispered a voice behind Tawny Owl's back. "Lord Coroner."
Boreas Munn decided to speak.
"They are spectres. I saw the young Graf Kyailach, but he's dead."
Skellen looked at him, but didn't say anything.
"Lord Stefan," mumbled Dacre Silliphant. "Who are we to fight here?"
"They aren't men," groaned one of the mercenaries. "They're sorcerers and hellish devils. Human strength cannot cope against such as them." Tawny Owl crossed his arms on his chest and swept a bold and imperious gaze over the mercenaries. "So, we shall not get involved in this conflict of hellish forces," he announced thunderously and emphatically. "Let demons fight with demons, witches with witches, and ghosts with corpses risen from the grave. We won't interfere with them. We shall wait here calmly for the outcome of the battle." The mercenaries' faces brightened up. Their morale rose perceptibly. "That staircase is the only way out," Skellen continued in a powerful voice. "We'll wait here. We shall see who tries coming down it." A terrible boom resounded from above, and mouldings fell from the vault with an audible rustle. There was a stench of sulphur and burning. "It's too dark here," called Tawny Owl, thunderously and boldly to raise his troop's spirits. "Briskly, light whatever you can. Torches, brands. We have to see well whoever appears on those stairs. Fill those iron cressets with some fuel or other." "What kind of fuel, sir?" Skellen indicated wordlessly what kind. "Pictures?" a mercenary asked in disbelief. "Paintings?" "Yes, indeed," snorted Tawny Owl. "Why are you looking like that? Art is dead." Frames were splintered and paintings shredded. The well-dried wood and canvas, saturated with linseed oil, caught fire immediately and flared up with a bright flame. Boreas Munn watched, his mind completely made up. There was a boom and a flash, and the column they had managed to jump away from at almost the last moment disintegrated. The shaft broke. The capital, decorated with acanthus leaves, crashed to the floor, destroying a terracotta mosaic. A ball of lightning hurtled towards them with a hiss. Yennefer deflected it, screaming out a spell and gesticulating. Vilgefortz walked towards them, his cloak fluttering like a dragon's wings.
"I am not surprised at Yennefer," he said as he walked. "She is a woman, and thus an evolutionary inferior creature governed by hormonal chaos. But you, Geralt, are not only a man who is sensible by nature, but also a mutant, invulnerable to emotions."
He waved a hand. There was a boom and a flash. A lightning bolt bounced off the shield Yennefer had conjured up.
"In spite of your good sense,"
Vilgefortz continued to talk, pouring fire from hand to hand,
"in one matter you demonstrate astounding and foolish perseverance. You invariably desire to row upstream and piss into the wind. It had to end badly. Know that today, here in Stigger Castle, you have pissed into a hurricane."
A battle was raging somewhere on the lower stories. Someone screamed horribly, moaned and wailed in pain. Something was burning. Ciri could smell smoke and burning and felt a waft of hot air. Something boomed with such force that the columns holding up the vault trembled and stuccos fell off the walls. Ciri cautiously looked around the corner. The corridor was empty. She walked along it quickly and silently, with rows of statues standing in alcoves on her right and left. She had seen those statues once. In her dreams. She exited the corridor and ran straight into a man with a spear. She sprang aside, ready to dodge and somersault, and then she realized it wasn't a man, but a thin, grey-haired, stooped woman, and that it wasn't a spear, but a broom. "A sorceress with black hair is imprisoned somewhere around here." Ciri cleared her throat. "Where?" The woman with the broom was silent for a long time, moving her mouth as though chewing something.
"And how should I know, treasure?" she finally mumbled. "For I only clean here. Nothing else. Just clean up after them," she repeated, not looking at Ciri at all. "And all they do is keep dirt in the place. Look for yourself, treasure."
Ciri looked. There was a smudged zigzag streak of blood on the floor. The streak extended for a few paces and ended beside a corpse huddled up by the wall. 2 more corpses lay further on, one curled up in a ball, the other positively indecently spread-eagled. Beside them lay crossbows.
"They keep making a mess."
The woman took a pail and rag, kneeled down and set about cleaning.
"Dirt. Nothing but dirt. All the time, dirt. And I must clean and clean. Will there ever be an end to it?"
"No," Ciri said softly. "Never. That's what this world's come to." The woman stopped cleaning, but didn't raise her head.
"I clean," she said. "Nothing more. But I'll tell you, treasure, that you must go straight and then left."
"Thank you." The woman bowed her head even lower and resumed her cleaning. She was alone and lost in the maze of corridors.
"Madame Yennefer!"
Up until then she had kept quiet, afraid of saddling herself with Vilgefortz's men. But now,
"Yennefer!"
she thought she'd heard something. Yes, for sure. She ran into a gallery, and from there into a large hall between slender pillars. The stench of burning reached her nostrils again. Bonhart emerged like a ghost from a niche and punched her in the face. She staggered, and he leapt on her like a hawk, seized her by the throat, pinning her to the wall with his forearm. Ciri looked into his fish-like eyes and felt her heart drop downwards to her belly.
"I wouldn't have found you if you hadn't called," he wheezed out. "But you called, and longingly, to cap it all off. Have you missed me so, my little darling?"
Still pinning her to the wall, he slipped his hand into the hair on her nape. Ciri jerked her head. The bounty hunter grinned. He ran his hand over her arm, squeezed her breast, and grabbed her roughly by the crotch. Then he released her and pushed her so that she slid down the wall, and tossed a sword at her feet. Her swallow. And she knew at once what he wanted.
"I'd have preferred it in the ring," he drawled, "as the crowning achievement, as the grand finale of many beautiful performances. The Witcher girl against Leo Bonhart. Eh? People would pay to see something like that. Go on, pick up the weapon and draw it from the scabbard."
She did as he said, but she didn't draw the blade, just slung it across her back so the hilt would be within reach. Bonhart took a step back.
"I thought it would suffice me to gladden my eyes with the sight of that surgery Vilgefortz is preparing for you," he said. "I was mistaken. I must feel your life flowing down my blade. I defy witchcraft and sorcerers, destiny, prophecies, the fate of the world.
I defy the elder and younger blood. What do all these predictions and spells mean to me? What do I gain from them? Nothing. Nothing can compare with the pleasure. He broke off. She saw him purse his lips, saw his eyes flash ominously.
I'll bleed you to death, witcher girl, he hissed. And afterwards, before you cool off, we'll celebrate our nuptials. You are mine, and you'll die mine. Draw your weapon.
A distant thud resounded, and the castle shuddered.
Vilgefortz,
Bonhart explained with an inscrutable expression, is reducing your witcher rescuers to pulp.
Go on, girl. Draw your sword.
Shall I run away? She thought, frozen in terror. Flee to other places, to other times? If only I could get far from him, if only... She felt shame. How can I run away? Leave Yennefer and Geralt at their mercy? But good sense told her, I'm not much use to them dead. She focused, pressing her fists to her temples. Bonhart knew immediately what she was planning and lunged for her, but it was too late. There was a buzzing in Ciri's ears. Something flashed. I've done it, she thought triumphantly, and at once realized her triumph was premature. She realized it on hearing furious yelling and curses. The evil, hostile, and paralyzing aura of the place was probably to blame for the fiasco. She hadn't travelled far, not even out of eyeshot, only to the opposite end of the gallery, not far from Bonhart, but beyond the range of his hands and his sword, temporarily at least. Pursued by his roar, Ciri turned and ran. She ran down a long, wide corridor, followed by the dead glances of the alabaster caryatids holding up the arcades. She turned once, and then again. She wanted to lose and confuse Bonhart, and furthermore, she was heading towards the noises of the battle. Her friends would be where the fighting was raging, she was sure. She rushed into a large round room, in the centre of which a sculpture portraying a woman with her face covered, most probably a goddess, stood on a marble plinth. 2 corridors led away from the room, both quite narrow. She chose at random. Naturally, she chose wrongly.
"The wench!" roared one of the thugs. "We have her!"
There were too many of them to be able to risk fighting, even in a narrow corridor, and Bonhart was surely nearby. Ciri turned back and bolted. She burst into the room with the marble goddess and froze. Before her stood a knight with a great sword, in a black cloak and helmet decorated with the wings of a bird of prey. The town was burning. She heard the roar of fire, saw flames flickering, and felt the heat of the conflagration. The neighing of horses and the screaming of the murdered were in her ears. The black bird's wings suddenly flapped, covering everything. Help! Sintra, she thought, coming to her senses. The Isle of Thaneth. He's followed me all the way here. He's a demon. I'm surrounded by demons, by nightmares from my dreams. Bonhart behind me, him in front of me. The shouting and stamping of enemies coming running could be heard behind her. The knight in the plumed helmet suddenly took a step forward. Ciri overcame her fear. She yanked Swallow from its scabbard. You will not touch me! The knight moved forward, and Ciri noticed in amazement that a fair-haired girl, armed with a curved sabre, was hiding behind his cloak. The girl flashed past Ciri like a lynx, sending one of the approaching lackeys sprawling with a slash of her sabre. And the Black Knight, astonishingly, rather than attacking Ciri, slit open another thug with a powerful blow. The remaining ones retreated into the corridor. The fair-haired girl rushed for the door, but didn't manage to close it, although she was whirling her sabre menacingly and yelling. The lackeys shoved her back from the portal. Ciri saw one of them stab her with a pilum, saw the girl fall to her knees. Ciri leapt and slashed backhand with Swallow, while the Black Knight ran up on the other side, hacking terribly with his longsword. The fair-haired girl, still on her knees, drew an axe from her belt and hurled it, hitting one of the bruisers right in the face. Then she lunged for the door, slammed it, and the knight bolted it. Phew, said the girl.
Oak and iron. It'll take them some time to chop the way through that.
They won't waste time. They'll search for another way, commented the Black Knight soberly, after which his face suddenly darkened on seeing the girl's blood-soaked trouser leg. The girl waved a hand dismissively. Let's be away. The knight removed his helmet and looked at Ciri. I'm Kaia Maur Dyffrin, son of Ciarlach. I came here with Geralt to rescue you, Ciri. I know it's unbelievable.
I've seen more unbelievable things, Ciri growled. You've come a long way, Kaia. Where's Geralt?
He looked at her. She remembered his eyes from Thaneth, dark blue and as soft as silk. Pretty. He is rescuing the sorceress, he answered. That
Yennefer, let's go.
Yes, said the fair-haired girl, putting a makeshift dressing on her thigh.
We still have to kick a few asses for Auntie.
Let's go, repeated the knight. But it was too late.
Run away,
whispered Ciri, seeing who was approaching along the corridor.
He's the devil incarnate, but he only wants me. He won't come after you. Run! Help Geralt!
Kaia shook his head. Ciri, he said kindly, I'm surprised by what you're saying. I came here from the end of the world to find you, rescue you and defend you. And now you want me to run away?
You don't know what you're up against.
Kaia pulled up his sleeve, tore off his cloak and wrapped it around his left arm. He brandished his sword and whirled it so fast it hummed. I'll soon find out. Bonhart, seeing the three of them, stopped, but only for a moment.
Aha, he said. Have the reinforcements arrived? Your companions, witcher girl? Very well. Two less, two more, makes no difference.
Ciri had a sudden flash of inspiration.
Say farewell to your life, Bonhart, she yelled. It's the end of you. You've met your match.
She must have overdone it, and he caught the lie in her voice. He stopped and looked suspiciously.
The Witcher? Really?
Kaia whirled his sword, standing in position. Bonhart didn't budge.
This witch has more of a liking for younger men than I expected, he hissed. Just look here, my young blade.
He pulled his shirt open. Silver medallions flashed in his fist. A cat, a griffin, and a wolf.
If you are truly a witcher,
he ground his teeth,
know that your own quack amulet will soon embellish my collection. If you're not a witcher, you'll be a corpse before you manage to blink. It would be wise, therefore, to get out of my way and take to your heels. I want this wench. I don't bear a grudge against you.
You talk big, Kaia said calmly, twirling the blade. Let's see if your bite's worse than your bark. Angoulême, Ciri, flee.
Kair,
run, he corrected himself, and help Geralt. They ran. Ciri was holding up the limping Angoulême.
You asked for it.
Bonhart squinted his pale eyes and moved forward, whirling his sword. I asked for it? Kaia Maur Dyffrin of Ciarlach repeated dully. No, it's what destiny wants. They leapt at each other, quickly engaged, surrounding each other with a frantic kaleidoscope of blades. The corridor filled with the clang of iron, seemingly making the marble sculpture tremble and rock.
You aren't bad, rasped Bonhart when they came apart. You aren't bad, my young blade. But you're no witcher. The little viper deceived me. You're done for. Prepare for death.
You talk big. Kaia took a deep breath. The clash had convinced him he had faint chance with the fishy-eyed man. This man was too fast and too strong for him. The only chance was that Bonhart was in a hurry to get after Ciri, and he was clearly irritated. Bonhart attacked again. Kaia parried a cut, stooped, jumped, seized his opponent by the belt, shoved him against the wall, and kneed him hard in the crotch. Bonhart caught him by the face, battered him powerfully on the side of the head with his sword pommel. Once, twice, thrice. The third blow shoved Kaia back. He saw the flash of the blade. He parried instinctively. Too slowly. It was a strictly observed tradition in the Dyverin family that all male members would hold a silent vigil lasting a whole day and night over the body of a fallen kinsman once he was inhumed in the castle armoury. The women, gathered in a remote wing of the castle so as not to disturb the men, not to distract them or disrupt their reflections, would sob, keen and faint. When brought round, they sobbed and keened again, and da capo. Sobbing and weeping, even among women, Vicovarian noblewomen, was an unwelcome faux pas and a great dishonour. But among the Dyverins, that and no other was the tradition, and no one ever changed it, or meant to change it. The 10-year-old Cair, the youngest brother of Eilil, who had fallen in Nazaire and was then lying in the castle armoury, was not yet a man in terms of customs and traditions. He was not allowed to join the group of men gathered around the open coffin, and he was not permitted to sit in silence with his grandfather Grufydd, with his father Ciarlach, his brother Daran, or the whole collection of uncles and cousins. Neither was he permitted, naturally, to sob and faint along with his grandmother, mother, 3 sisters, and the whole collection of aunts and cousins. Cair clowned about and made mischief on the castle walls along with the rest of his young relatives who had come to Don Dyvra for the obsequies, funeral and wake, and he pummeled any boys who considered that the bravest of the brave in the fighting for Nazaire were their own fathers and older brothers, but not Eilil ib Ciarlach.
Cair, come here, my son.
In the cloister stood Maur, Cair's mother, and her sister, his aunt Sinead Varanahid. His mother's face was red and so swollen from weeping that Cair was terrified. It shocked him that weeping could make such a monster out of such a comely woman as his mother. He made a firm resolution never ever to cry.
Remember, son,
Maur sobbed, pressing the boy so hard to her breast he couldn't catch his breath.
Remember this day. Remember who took the life from your dear brother Eilil. The damned Nordlings did it. Your foes, my son. You are ever to hate them. You are to hate that damned, murderous nation.
I shall hate them, mother of mine, Cair promised, somewhat surprised. Firstly, his brother Eilil had died the praiseworthy and enviable death of a warrior, in battle with honour. What was one to shed tears over? Secondly, it was no secret that his grandmother, Eviva, Maur's mother, was descended from Nordlings. Papa had more than once called his grandmother in anger she-wolf from the north, behind her back, naturally.
Well, but if mother is now ordering me...
I shall hate them, he pledged eagerly. I already hate them, and when I'm big and have a real sword, I'll go to war and chop off their heads. You'll see, Mum. His mother took a breath and began sobbing. Aunt Sinead held her up. Cair clenched his little fists and trembled with hatred for those who had wronged his mamma, making her so ugly. Bonhart's blow clove his temple, cheek and mouth. Cair dropped his sword and staggered, and the bounty hunter cut him between his neck and collarbone using the force of a half-turn. Cair tumbled at the feet of the marble goddess, and his blood splashed the statue's plinth like a pagan sacrifice. There was a boom. The floor trembled beneath feet, and a shield fell with a thud from a wall panoply. Acrid smoke trailed and crept along the corridor. Ciri wiped her face. The fair-haired girl she was supporting weighed her down like a millstone.
Quick! We must run quicker! I can't run any quicker,
said the girl, and suddenly sat down heavily on the floor. Ciri saw with horror a red puddle begin to spill out and collect beneath the seated girl, beneath her blood-soaked trouser leg. The girl was white as a sheet. Ciri threw herself on her knees beside her, pulled off her scarf and then her belt, trying to apply tourniquets. But the wound was too severe, and too near her groin. The blood kept dripping. The girl grasped her by the hand, her fingers as cold as ice.
Ciri?
Yes?
I'm Angoulême. I didn't believe we'd find you. But I followed Geralt. Because it's impossible not to follow him, isn't it?
It is. That's how he is.
We found you. and rescued you. And Fringilla mocked us. Tell me, don't say anything, please. Tell me.
Angoulême was moving her lips, slower and slower, and with greater difficulty.
Tell me. You're a queen, aren't you? In Sintra? We'll be in your good graces, won't we? Will you make me a countess? Tell me, but don't lie. Can you? Tell me. Don't say anything. Save your strength.
Angoulême sighed, suddenly leaned over forward, and rested her brow against Ciri's shoulder.
I knew, she said quite clearly. I knew that a brothel in Toussaint would be a better fucking way of making a living.
A long, long time passed before Ciri realized she was holding a dead girl in her arms. She saw him as he approached, being led by the lifeless looks of the alabaster caryatids holding up the arcades, and suddenly understood that flight was impossible, that it was impossible to escape from him, that she would have to face him. She knew it, but was still too afraid of him. He drew his weapon. Swallow's blade sang softly. She knew that song. She retreated down the wide corridor, and he followed her, holding his sword in both hands. Blood trickled down the blade, heavy drops dripping from the crossguard.
Dead,
he judged, stepping over Angoulême's body.
Well and good. Your young blade has also fallen.
Ciri felt desperation seizing her, felt her fingers gripping the hilt so tightly it hurt. She retreated.
You deceived me, drawled Bonhart, following her. The young blade didn't have a medallion, but something tells me somebody will be found in this castle who wears one. Someone like that will be found. Old Leo Bonhart stakes his life on it, somewhere near the witch Yennefer. But first things first, Viper. First of all, us. You and me. And our nuptials.
Ciri got her bearings. Describing a short arc with Swallow, she took up her position. She began to circle him, quicker and quicker, forcing the bounty hunter to move around on the spot.
Last time, he muttered, that trick wasn't much use to you. Well, can't you learn from your mistakes?
Ciri speeded up. She deceived and beguiled, tantalized and hypnotized with flowing soft movements of her blade. Bonhart whirled his sword in a hissing moulinet.
That doesn't work on me, he snarled, and it bores me.
He shortened the distance with 2 rapid strides.
Play music.
He leapt, cut hard. Ciri spun around in a pirouette, jumped, landed confidently on her left foot, and struck at once without assuming a position. Before the blade had clanged on Bonhart's parry, she had spun past, smoothly moving in under the whistling blow. She struck again, without a backswing, using an unnatural, unorthodox bend of the elbow. Bonhart blocked, using the momentum of the parry to immediately slash from the left. She was expecting that, and all she needed was a slight bend of the knees and a sway of her trunk to move her whole body aside from under the blade. She countered and thrust at once. But this time he was waiting for her and deceived her with a feint. Not meeting a parry, she almost lost her balance, saving herself with a lightning-fast leap, but his sword caught her arm anyway. At first, she thought the blade had only cut through her padded sleeve, but a moment later, she felt the warm liquid in her armpit and on her arm. The alabaster caryatids observed them with indifferent eyes. She drew back, and he followed her, hunched, making wide, sweeping movements with his sword, like the bony death Ciri had seen on paintings in the temple. The dance of the skeletons, she thought. The grim reaper is coming. She drew back. The warm liquid was now dripping down her forearm and hand.
First blood to me,
he said, at the sight of the drops splattering star-like on the floor.
Who'll draw the second blood?
My betrothed? She retreated. Look around. It's the end.
He was right. The corridor ended in nothingness, in an abyss, at the bottom of which could be seen the dust-covered, dirty and smashed-up floorboards of the lower story. This part of the castle was destroyed. There was no floor at all. There was only a framework of load-bearing timbers, posts, ridges, and a lattice of beams. She didn't hesitate for long. She stepped onto a beam and moved backwards along it without taking her eyes off Bonhart, watching his every move. That saved her, for he suddenly charged her, running along the beam, slashing with rapid diagonal blows, whirling his sword in lightning-fast feints. She knew what he was counting on. A wrong parry or mistake with a feint would have upset her balance, and then she would have fallen off the beam onto the smashed-up woodblocks of the lower floor. This time, Ciri didn't let the feints deceive her. Quite the opposite. She spun around nimbly and feinted a blow from the right, and when for a split second he hesitated, cut with a right second so quickly and powerfully that Bonhart rocked after parrying, and would have fallen if not for his height. He managed to hold onto a ridge by reaching up with his left hand, keeping his balance, but he lost concentration for a split second, and that was enough for Ciri. She lunged hard, fully extending her arm and blade. He didn't even flinch as Swallow's blade passed with a hiss across his chest and left arm. He immediately countered so viciously that had Ciri not turned a back somersault, the blow would probably have cut her in half. She hopped onto the adjacent beam, dropping onto one knee with her sword held horizontally over her head. Bonhart glanced at his shoulder and raised his left arm, already marked by a pattern of wavy crimson lines. He looked at the thick drops dripping downwards into the abyss.
Well, well, he said. You do know how to learn from your mistakes.
His voice trembled with fury. But Ciri knew him too well. He was calm, composed, and ready to kill. He leapt onto her beam, whirling his sword, went for her like a hurricane, treading surely without wobbling or even looking at his feet. The beam creaked, raining down dust and rotten wood. He pushed on, slashing diagonally. He forced her backwards. He attacked so quickly she couldn't risk a leap or a somersault, so she had to keep parrying and dodging. She saw a flash in his fishy eyes. She knew what was afoot. He was driving her against a post to the truss beneath the ridge. He was pushing her back to a place from where there was no escape. She had to do something. And she suddenly knew what. Caer Moren, the pendulum. You push off from the pendulum. You take its momentum, its energy. You take its momentum by pushing off. Do you understand?
Yes, Geralt.
All of a sudden, with the speed of a striking viper, she went from a parry to a cut. Swallow's blade groaned, striking against Bonhart's edge. Simultaneously, Ciri pushed off and jumped onto the adjacent beam. She landed, miraculously keeping her balance. She took a few quick, light steps and leapt again, back onto Bonhart's beam, landing behind his back. He spun around in time, made a sweeping cut, almost blindly, to where her leap should have carried her. He missed her by a hair's breadth, and the force of the blow made him stagger. Ciri attacked like a lightning strike. She lunged, dropping onto one knee. She struck powerfully and surely. And she froze, with her sword held out to the side, watching calmly as the long, slanting, perfectly straight slit in his jacket began to well up and brim a dense red.
You.
Bonhart staggered.
You.
He came for her. He was already slow and sluggish. She eluded him by leaping backwards, and he lost his balance. He fell onto one knee, but did not plant his other on the beam, and the wood was now wet and slippery. He looked at Ciri for a second. Then he fell. She saw him tumble onto the parquet floor in a geyser of dust, plaster, and blood, saw his sword fly several yards to one side. He lay motionless, spread out, huge and gaunt, wounded and utterly defenseless, but still terrible. It took some time, but he finally twitched, groaned, tried to raise his head. He moved his arms, he moved his legs. He crept to a post and propped his back up against it. He groaned again, feeling his bloodied chest and belly with both hands. Ciri leapt down and fell beside him onto one knee, as softly as a cat. She saw his fishy eyes widen in fear.
You won, he wheezed, looking at Swallow's blade. You won, Witcher girl. Pity it wasn't in the arena. It would have been some spectacle.
She didn't reply.
It was I who gave you that sword. Do you remember?
I remember everything.
Surely you won't, he grunted. Surely you won't finish me off, will you? You won't do it. You won't finish off a beaten and defenseless man. I know you, after all, Ciri. You're too noble for that.
He looked long at her. Very long. Then she bent over. Bonhart's eyes widened even more. But she just tore from his neck the medallions, the wolf, the cat, and the griffin. Then she turned around and walked towards the exit. He lunged at her with a knife, sprang at her dishonorably and treacherously, and as silent as a bat. Only at the last moment, when the dagger was about to plunge up to the guard in her back, did he roar, putting all his hatred into the bellow. She dodged the treacherous thrust with a swift half-turn and leap, swung her arm and struck quickly and widely, powerfully, with a full swing, increasing the power with a twist of the hips. Swallow swished and cut with the very tip of the blade. There was a hiss and a squelch, and Bonhart grabbed his throat. His fishy eyes were popping out of his head. "Didn't I tell you," Ciri said coldly, "that I remember everything?" Bonhart goggled even more, and then fell. He overbalanced and tumbled over backwards, raising dust. And he lay like that, huge, as bony as the Grim Reaper, on the dirty floor among broken woodblocks. He was still clutching his throat tightly with all his might, but although he squeezed hard, his life was draining away fast between his fingers, spreading out around his head in a great black halo. Ciri stood over him, without a word, but allowing him to see her clearly, so as to take her image alone, with him where he was going. Bonhart glanced at her, his gaze growing dull and blurred. He was shivering convulsively, scraping his heels over the floorboards. Then he uttered a gurgle of the kind a funnel gives just before it empties, and it was the last sound he made. There was a bang, and the stained glass windows exploded with a thud and a clink. "Look out, Geralt!" They jumped aside just in time. A blinding flash of lightning ploughed up the floor. Chips of terracotta and sharp shards of mosaic wailed in the air. Another flash of lightning hit the column the Witcher was hiding behind. The column broke into 3 parts. Half the arcade broke off the vault and crashed onto the floor with a deafening boom. Geralt, lying flat on the floor, shielded his head with his hands, aware of what poor protection they were against more than 10 tons of rubble. He had prepared himself for the worst, but things were not too bad. He got up quickly, managed to see the glow of a magical shield above him, and realized that Yennefer's magic had saved him. Vilgefortz turned towards the sorceress and pulverized the pillar she was sheltering behind. He roared furiously, sewing together a cloud of smoke and dust with threads of fire. Yennefer managed to jump clear and retaliated, firing at the sorcerer her own flash of lightning, which, nonetheless, Vilgefortz deflected effortlessly and with sheer contempt. He replied with a blow that hurled Yennefer to the floor. Geralt rushed at him, wiping plaster from his face. Vilgefortz turned his eyes towards him, and a hand from which flames exploded with a roar. The Witcher instinctively shielded himself with his sword. The rune-covered dwarven blade protected him astonishingly, cutting the stream of fire in half.
"Ha!" roared Vilgefortz. "Impressive, Witcher, and what say you to this?"
The Witcher said nothing. He flew as if he'd been rammed, fell onto the floor and shot across it, only stopping at the base of the column. The column broke up and fell to pieces, again taking a considerable part of the vault with it. This time, Yennefer wasn't quick enough to give him magical protection. A huge lump broken off from the arcade hit him in the shoulder. The pain paralyzed him for a moment. Yennefer, chanting spells, sent flash after flash of lightning towards Vilgefortz. None of them hit the target, all harmlessly bouncing off the magical sphere protecting the sorcerer. Vilgefortz stretched out his arms and suddenly spread them. Yennefer cried out in pain and soared up into the air, levitating. Vilgefortz twisted his hands exactly as though he were wringing out a wet rag. The sorceress howled piercingly and began to spin. Geralt sprang up, overcoming the pain. But Regis was quieter. The vampire appeared out of nowhere in the form of an enormous bat and fell on Vilgefortz with a noiseless glide. Before the sorcerer could protect himself with a spell, Regis had slashed him across the face with his claws, only missing his eye because of its tiny size. Vilgefortz bellowed and waved his arms. Yennefer, now released, tumbled down onto a heap of rubble with an ear-splitting groan, blood bursting from her nose onto her face and chest. Geralt was now close, was already raising the scythe to strike. But Vilgefortz was not yet defeated and did not mean to surrender. He threw off the Witcher with a great surge of power and shot a blinding white flame at the attacking vampire, which sliced through a column like a hot knife through butter. Regis nimbly avoided the flame and materialized in his normal shape alongside Geralt.
Beware,
grunted the Witcher, trying to see how Yennefer was.
Beware, Regis.
Beware? Yelled the vampire. Me? I didn't come here to beware.
With an incredible lightning-fast tiger-like bound, he fell on the sorcerer and grabbed him by the throat. His fangs flashed. Vilgefortz howled in horror and rage. For a moment it seemed as though it would be the end of him, but that was an illusion. The sorcerer had a weapon in his arsenal for every occasion, and for every opponent. Even a vampire. The hands that seized Regis glowed like red-hot iron. The vampire screamed. Geralt also screamed, seeing the sorcerer literally tearing Regis apart. He leapt to his aid, but wasn't fast enough. Vilgefortz pushed the mutilated vampire against a column and shot white fire at him from close up out of both hands. Regis screamed so horribly that the Witcher covered his ears with his hands. The rest of the stained glass windows exploded with a roar and a smash, and the columns simply melted. The vampire melted along with it, fusing into an amorphous lump. Geralt swore, putting all his rage and despair into the curse. He leapt at Vilgefortz, raising his scythe to strike, but failed. Vilgefortz turned around and struck him with magical energy. The Witcher flew the whole length of the hall and slammed into the wall, sliding down it. He lay like a fish, gasping for air, not wondering what was broken, but what was intact. Vilgefortz walked towards him. A 6-foot iron bar materialized in his hand.
I could have reduced you to ashes with a spell, he said. I could have melted you into clinker like I did to that monster a moment ago. But you, Witcher, ought to die differently, in a fight. Not a very honest one, perhaps, but still.
Geralt didn't believe he'd be able to stand, but he did. He spat blood from his cut lip. He gripped his sword more tightly.
On Thaneth.
Vilgefortz came closer, whirled the bar in a moulinet.
I only broke you a little bit, sparingly, for it was meant to be a lesson. Since it wasn't learned, this time I'll break you thoroughly, into tiny little bones, so that no one will ever be able to stick you back together again.
He attacked. Geralt didn't run away. He took on the fight. The bar flickered and whistled. The sorcerer circled around the dancing Witcher. Geralt avoided the blows and delivered his own, but Vilgefortz deftly parried, and then steel groaned mournfully as it struck steel. The sorcerer was as quick and agile as a demon. He tricked Geralt with a twist of his trunk and a feigned blow from the left, and slammed him in the ribs from below. Before the Witcher could get his balance and his breath back, he was hit in the shoulder so hard he fell to his knees. He dodged aside, saving his skull from a blow from above, but could not avoid a reverse thrust from below, above the hip. He staggered and struck his back against the wall. He still had enough wits about him to fall to the floor, just in time, because the iron bar grazed his hair and slammed into the wall, sending sparks flying. Geralt rolled over, and the bar struck sparks on the floor right beside his head. The second blow hit him in the shoulder blade. There was shock and paralyzing pain. Weakness flowed down to his legs. The sorcerer raised the bar. Triumph burned in his eyes. Geralt clenched Fringilla's medallion in his fist. The bar fell with a clang, striking the floor a foot from the witch's head. Geralt rolled away and quickly got up on one knee. Vilgefortz leapt forward and struck. The bar missed the target again by a few inches. The sorcerer shook his head in disbelief and hesitated for a second. He sighed, suddenly understanding. His eyes lit up. He leapt, taking a swing. Too late. Geralt slashed him hard across the belly. Vilgefortz screamed, dropped the bar and staggered back, bent over. The Witcher was already upon him. He pushed him with his boot onto the stump of the broken column and cut vigorously, diagonally from collarbone to hip. Blood gushed on the floor, painting an undulating pattern. The sorcerer screamed and fell to his knees. He lowered his head and looked down at his belly and chest. For a long time he could not tear his eyes away from what he saw. Geralt waited calmly in position, with the scythe ready to strike. Vilgefortz groaned piercingly and raised his head.
Geralt!
The Witcher didn't let him finish. It was very quiet for a long time. "I didn't know," Yennefer said at last, scrambling out of a pile of rubble. She looked terrible. The blood trickling from her nose had poured all over her chin and cleavage. "I didn't know you could cast illusory spells," she repeated, seeing Geralt's uncomprehending gaze, "capable even of deceiving Vilgefortz." "It's my medallion." "Uh-huh." She looked suspicious. "A curious thing. But anyway, we're only alive thanks to Ciri." "I beg your pardon?" "His eye. He never regained full coordination. He didn't always land his blow. But I mainly owe my life to—" She fell silent, glanced at the remains of the melted column, in which the outline of a shape could be discerned. "Who was that, Geralt?" "A friend. I'm going to miss him." "Was he a human?" "The epitome of humanity." "How are you, Yen?" "A few broken ribs, concussion, twisted hip joint, bruised spine. Besides that, excellent. And yourself?" "More or less the same." She looked impassively at Vilgefortz's head, lying exactly in the centre of the floor mosaic. The sorcerer's small eye, already glazed, looked at them with mute reproach. "That's a nice sight," she said. "It is," he admitted a moment later. "But I've already seen enough. Will you be able to walk?" "With your help, yes." And they met, all three of them, in a place where the corridors came together under the arcades. They met beneath the dead gazes of the alabaster caryatids. "Ciri," said the Witcher, and rubbed his eyes. "Ciri," said Yennefer, being held up by the Witcher. "Geralt," said Ciri. "Ciri," he replied, overcoming a sudden tightening of the throat. "Good to see you again." "Madame Yennefer." The sorceress freed herself from the Witcher's arm and straightened up with the greatest of effort. "What do you look like, girl?" she said severely. "Just look at you. Tidy up your hair. Don't stoop. Come here, please." Ciri approached, as stiff as an automaton. Yennefer straightened and smoothed her collar and tried to wipe the now dried blood from Ciri's sleeve. She touched her hair and uncovered the scar on her cheek. She hugged her tightly, very tightly. Geralt saw her hands on Ciri's back, saw the deformed fingers. He didn't feel anger, resentment, or hatred. He felt only weariness and a huge desire to be done with all of it.
Mama. Daughter.
Let's go. He decided to interrupt them, but only after a long while. Ciri sniffed noisily and wiped her nose with the back of her hand. Yennefer shot an angry look at her and wiped her eye, which something had probably got into. The Witcher looked down the corridor from where Ciri had exited, as though expecting somebody else to come out of it. Ciri shook her head. He understood. "Let's get out of here," he repeated.
"Yes," said Yennefer. "I want to see the sky." "I'll never leave you both," Ciri said softly. "Never."
"Let's get out of here," he repeated. "Ciri, hold Yen up."
"I don't need holding up. Let me, Mama."
In front of them was a stairway. A great stairway drowning in smoke in the twinkling glow of torches and fire in iron cressets. Ciri shuddered. She had seen that stairway before, in dreams and visions. Down below, far away, armed men were waiting.
"I'm tired," she whispered.
"Me too," admitted Geralt, drawing the sigh.
"I've had enough of killing."
"Me too."
"Is there no other way out?"
"No, there isn't. Only this stairway. We must, girl. Yen wants to see the sky, and I want to see the sky. Yen and you." Ciri looked back and glanced at Yennefer, who was resting on the balustrade in order not to fall down. She took out the medallions taken from Bonhart. She put the cat around her neck and gave Geralt the wolf. "I hope you know it's just a symbol," he said.
"Everything's just a symbol."
She removed Swallow from its scabbard.
"Let's go, Geralt."
"Let's go. Keep close beside me." Skelen's mercenaries were waiting at the bottom of the stairway, gripping their weapons in sweaty fists. Tawny Owl sent the first wave up the stairs. The mercenaries' iron-shod boots thudded on the steps. "Slowly, Ciri. Don't rush. Close to me."
"Yes, Geralt."
"And calmly, girl. Calmly. Remember, without anger, without hatred. We have to get out and see the sky, and the men that are standing in our way must die. Don't hesitate."
"I won't hesitate. I want to see the sky."
They got to the first landing without mishap. The mercenaries retreated before them, astonished and surprised by their calm. But after a moment, 3 of them leapt towards them, yelling and whirling their swords. They died at once. "Swarm them!" Tawny Owl bellowed from below. "Kill them!" The next 3 leapt forward. Geralt quickly sprang out to meet them, deceived them with a feint, and cut one of them from below in the throat. He turned around, made way for Ciri under his right arm, and Ciri smoothly slashed the next soldier in the armpit. The third one tried to save his life by leaping over the balustrade. He was too slow. Geralt wiped splashes of blood from his face. "Calmly, Ciri."
"I am calm."
The next 3. A flash of blades, screams, death. Thick blood crawled downwards, dribbling down the steps. A soldier in a brass-studded brigantine leapt towards them with a long pike. His eyes were wild from narcotics. Ciri shoved the shaft aside with a diagonal parry, and Geralt slashed. He wiped his face. They walked on, not looking back. The second landing was now close. "Kill them!" yelled Skelen. "Have at them! Kill them!" Stamping and yelling on the stairs. The flash of blades, screams, death. "Good, Ciri, but more calmly, without euphoria, and close to me."
"I'll always be close to you."
"Don't cut from the shoulder if you can from the elbow. Take heed."
"I am."
The flash of a blade, screams, blood, death.
Ciri?
I want to see the sky.
I love you very much.
I love you too.
Take heed. It's getting slippery.
The flash of blades, moaning. They walked on, catching up with the blood pouring down the steps. They walked down, always down, down the steps of Stigger Castle. A soldier attacking them slipped on a bloody step, fell flat on the ground right at their feet, and howled for mercy, covering his head with both hands. They passed him without looking. No one dared to bar their way until the third landing.
Bows!
Stefan Skellen bellowed from below.
Fire the crossbows! Boreas Munn was meant to bring the crossbows. Where is he?
Boreas Munn, which Tawny Owl couldn't have known, was already quite far away. He was riding eastwards with his forehead against his horse's mane, squeezing as much gallop out of his steed as he could. Only one of the men sent for the bows had returned. The man who had decided to shoot had slightly shaking hands and eyes watering from fish-tech. The first bolt barely grazed the balustrade. The second didn't even hit the stairs.
Higher! Yelled Tawny Owl. Go higher, you fool! Shoot from up close!
The crossbowman pretended he hadn't heard. Skellen cursed at great length, snatched the crossbow from him, leapt onto the stairway, kneeled down and took aim. Geralt quickly covered Ciri with his body. But the girl slipped out from behind him like lightning, so when the bowstring clanged, she was already in position. She twisted her sword to the upper quarter and hit the bolt back so hard it somersaulted many times before it fell.
Very good, muttered Geralt. Very good, Ciri. But if you ever do that again, I'll tan your hide.
Skellen dropped the crossbow and suddenly realized he was alone. All of his men were at the very bottom in a tight little group. None of them were too keen to go up the stairs. There seemed to be fewer than there were before. Once more, several ran off somewhere, probably to fetch crossbows. And the Witcher and the Witcher girl, not hurrying, but not slowing either, walked down the blood-covered stairway of Stigger Castle. Close to each other, shoulder to shoulder, tantalizing and bamboozling their foes with fast movements of their blades. Skellen walked backwards and didn't stop, right down to the very bottom. When he found himself in the group of his own men, he noticed that the retreat was continuing. He swore impotently.
Lads, he yelled,
and his voice broke discordantly.
On you go! Have at them! En masse! Go on, have at them! Follow me!
Go yourself, sir, mumbled one of them, raising a hand with fish-tech to his nose. Tawny Owl punched him, covering the man's face, sleeve, and the front of his jacket in white powder. The Witcher and the Witcher girl passed another landing.
When they get to the very bottom, we'll be able to surround them, roared Skellen. Go on, lads! Have at them! To arms!
Geralt glanced at Ciri, and almost howled with fury, seeing streaks shining white as silver in her ashen hair. He controlled himself. It wasn't the time for anger.
Be careful, he said softly. Stay close to me.
I'm always going to be close to you.
It'll be hot down there.
I know, but we're together.
We're together.
I'm with you, said Yennefer, following them down the stairs, red and slippery with blood.
Form up! Form up! roared Tawny Owl.
Several of the men who had run to get crossbows returned, without them, very terrified. The rumble of doors being forced by battle-axes, thudding, the clanking of iron and the sound of heavy steps resounded from all three corridors leading to the stairway. And suddenly, soldiers in black helmets, armor and cloaks, with the sign of a silver salamander, marched out of all three corridors. On being shouted at thunderously and menacingly, Skellen's mercenaries threw their weapons on the floor, one after the other. Crossbows and the blades of glaives and bear spears were aimed at the more hesitant, and they were urged on by even more menacing shouts. Now all of them obeyed, for it was evident that the black-cloaked soldiers were extremely keen to kill somebody, and were only waiting for a pretext. Tawny Owl stood at the foot of a column, arms crossed on his chest. Miraculous relief, muttered Ciri. Geralt shook his head. Crossbows and spear blades were also being aimed at them.
Lead van Vort.
There was no sense in resisting. Black-cloaked soldiers were swarming like ants at the bottom of the stairs, and the witches were very, very weary. But they didn't drop their swords. They placed them carefully on the steps, and then sat down. Geralt felt Ciri's warm shoulder and heard her breath. Yennefer descended, walking past corpses and pools of blood, showing the black-cloaked soldiers her unarmed hands. She sat down heavily beside them on a step. Geralt also felt the warmth against his other shoulder.
It's a pity it can't always be like this, he thought.
And he knew it couldn't. Tawny Owl's men were tied up and escorted away, one after the other. There were more and more soldiers in black cloaks bearing the salamander. Suddenly, high-ranking officers appeared among them, recognizable by the white plumes and silver edging on their suits of armor, and by the respect which the others showed in parting to let them pass. The soldiers stood back with even greater respect before one of the officers, whose helmet was particularly sumptuously decorated with silver, bowing before him. The man stopped in front of Skellen, who was standing at the foot of the column. Tawny Owl, it was very obvious, even in the flickering light of the torches and the paintings burning out in the cressets, paled, becoming as white as a sheet.
"Stefan Skellen," said the officer in a resonant voice,
a voice which sounded right up to the vault of the hall.
"You will be tried in court and punished for treason."
Tawny Owl was led away, but his hands weren't tied like the ordinary soldiers had been. The officer turned around. A burning rag broke off from a tapestry up above. It fell, swirling like a huge fiery bird. The brightness shone on the silver-edged armor, on the visor extending halfway down the cheeks, which was, like all the black-cloaked soldiers, shaped like horrendous toothed jaws.
"Now our turn," thought Geralt.
He wasn't mistaken. The officer looked at Ciri, and his eyes burned in the slits of the helmet, noticing and registering everything. The paleness, the scar on her cheek, the blood on her sleeve and hand, the white streaks in her hair. Then the Nilfgaardian turned his gaze onto the Witcher.
"Vilgefortz?" he asked in his resonant voice.
Geralt shook his head.
"Cair Epcialach?"
Another shake of the head.
"A slaughter," said the officer, looking at the stairs. "A bloodbath. Well, he who lives by the sword. Furthermore, you've saved the hangman work. You've travelled a long way, Witcher."
Geralt didn't comment. Ciri sniffed loudly and wiped her nose with her wrist. Yennefer gave her a scolding look. The Nilfgaardian also noticed that, and smiled.
"You've travelled a long way," he repeated. "You've come here from the end of the world, following her and for her sake, even if only for that reason you deserve something. Lord de Rideau?"
"Yes, Your Imperial Highness."
The Witcher wasn't surprised. "Please find a discreet chamber in which I shall be able to converse completely undisturbed with Sir Geralt of Rivia. During that time, please offer all possible comforts and services to the two ladies, under vigilant and unremitting guard."
"Yes, sir, Your Imperial Majesty."
"Sir Geralt, please follow me."
The Witcher stood up. He glanced at Yennefer and Ciri, wanting to calm them and warn them not to do anything foolish. But it wasn't necessary. They were both terribly tired and resigned.
"You've travelled a long way," repeated Emir va Emrys Daithwen Athan Incarn ep Morvuth, the white flame dancing on the barrows of his enemies, removing his helmet. "I'm not sure," Geralt calmly replied, "if you haven't travelled further, Dooney." "You've recognized me. Well, well." The Emperor smiled. "And they say the lack of a beard and my way of holding myself have changed me utterly. Many of the people who used to see me earlier in Sintra came to Nilfgaard later and saw me during audiences, and no one recognized me. But you only saw me once, and that was 16 years ago. Did I become so embedded in your memory?" "I wouldn't have recognized you. You have indeed changed greatly. I simply worked out who you were, some time ago. I guessed, not without help and a hint from someone else, what role incest played in Ciri's family, in her blood. I even dreamed about the most awful, the most hideous incest imaginable in a gruesome nightmare. And well, here you are in person. You can barely stand, said Emir coldly, and deliberate impertinence is making you even more unsteady. You may sit in the presence of the Emperor. I grant you that privilege, until the end of your days. Geralt sat down with relief. Emir continued to stand, leaning against a carved wardrobe. You saved my daughter's life, he said, several times. I thank you for that, on behalf of myself and posterity. You disarm me. Cirilla will go to Nilfgaard. Emir was not bothered by the mockery. She will become empress at a suitable moment, in precisely the same way that dozens of girls have become and do become queens, meaning almost not knowing their spouses, often not having a good opinion of them on the basis of their first encounter, often disappointed by the first days and first nights of marriage. Cirilla would be the first. Geralt refrained from comment. Cirilla, continued the Emperor, will be happy, like most of the queens I was talking about. It will come with time. Cirilla will transfer the love that I do not demand at all onto the son I will beget with her. An archduke, and later an emperor who will beget a son who will be ruler of the world and will save the world from destruction. Thus speaks the prophecy, whose exact contents only I know. Naturally, the White Flame continued, Cirilla will never find out who I am. The secret will die, along with those who know it. That's clear, Geralt nodded. It can't be clearer. You cannot fail to detect the hand of destiny in all of this, Emir said after a long time. All of this, including your activities from the very beginning. I see rather the hand of Vilgefortz, for it was he who directed you to Sintra, wasn't it? When you were the enchanted Urkion, he made Pavetta. You're stumbling in the dark. Emir interrupted brutally, tossing his salamander-decorated cloak over his shoulder. You don't know anything, and you don't have to know. I didn't ask you here to tell you my life story or to excuse myself before you. The only thing you have earned is the assurance that the girl will not be harmed. I have no debts towards you, Witcher. None. Yes, you do, Geralt interrupted brutally. You broke the contract. You went back on your word. They are debts, Dooney. You broke a promise as a princeling, and you have a debt as an emperor, with imperial interest, 10 years' worth. Is that all? That is all. For only that is owed to me, nothing more, but nothing less either. I was to collect the child when it turned 6. You didn't wait for the promised date. You planned to steal it from me before it passed. The destiny you keep talking about sneered at you, however. You tried to fight that destiny for the following 10 years. Now you have her. You have Ciri, your own daughter, whom you once basely deprived of parents, and with whom you now mean to vilely beget incestuous children. Without demanding love, rightly as a matter of fact. You do not deserve her love. Just between us, Dooney, I don't know how you will manage to look her in the eyes. The end justifies the means, Emir said dully. What I'm doing for posterity, to save the world. If the world is to be saved like that. The Witcher lifted his head. It will be better for it to perish. Believe me, Dooney, it'd be better if it perished. You're pale, Emir var Emrys said almost gently. Don't get so excited, for you are liable to faint. He moved away from the wardrobe, selected a chair and sat down. The Witcher's head was indeed spinning. The Iron Urkion, the Emperor began calmly and quietly, was to be a way of forcing my father to collaborate with the usurper. It was after the coup. My father, the overthrown Emperor, was in prison and being tortured. He couldn't be broken, so another way was tried. A sorcerer,
hired by the usurper, changed me into a monster in front of my father's eyes. The sorcerer added a little something on his own initiative, namely humor. Aemir, in our language, means an Urkion, an old name for a hedgehog. My father didn't allow himself to be broken, and so they murdered him. I, meanwhile, was released into a forest amidst mockery and scorn, and dogs were set on me. I survived. I wasn't hunted too seriously, for it wasn't known that the sorcerer had botched his work and that my human form returned at night. Fortunately, I knew several people of whose loyalty I could be certain, and at that time I was, for your information, 13. I had to flee the country, and the fact that I ought to search for a cure to the spell in the north, beyond the Manadal stairs, was read in the stars by a slightly crazy astrologer by the name of Zathisius. Later, when I was emperor, I gave him a tower and apparatus for that. At that time, he had to work on borrowed equipment. You know, it's a waste of time getting bogged down in what happened in Sintra. I deny, however, that it supposedly had anything to do with Vilgefortz. Firstly, I didn't know him then, and secondly, I had a strong aversion to mages. Even today, I don't like them, actually. While I remember, when I regained the throne, I caught up with the sorcerer who had served the usurper and tortured me in front of my father's eyes. I also displayed a sense of humor. The mage's name was Briathins, and in our language, that sounds almost the same as fried. Enough digressions, though. Let's get back to the matter at hand. Vilgefortz visited me secretly in Sintra shortly after Ciri's birth. He passed himself off as a trusted friend of people in Nilfgaard who were still loyal to me and had conspired against the usurper. He offered help and soon proved to be capable of helping. When, still mistrustful, I asked about his motives, he bluntly declared he was counting on gratitude for the favors, privileges, and power he would be given by the great emperor of Nilfgaard, meaning me. A powerful ruler who would govern half the world, who would beget an heir who would govern half the world. He intended to rise high himself, or so he declared, without inhibition, at the side of those great rulers. Here, he took out some scrolls bound with snakeskin and commended the contents to my attention. Thus, I learned of the prophecy. I learned about the fate of the world and the universe. I found out what I had to do, and came to the conclusion that the end justifies the means. Of course. My affairs were prospering in Nilfgaard, meanwhile. Emir ignored the sarcasm. My partisans were gaining more and more influence. Finally, having a group of frontline officers and a corps of cadets, they decided to launch a coup d'etat. I was needed for that, nonetheless. Me, myself, the rightful heir to the throne and crown of the empire, a rightful Emrys with the blood of the Emryses. It was to be something akin to the standard of the revolution. Just between us, plenty of the revolutionaries cherished the hope that I would be nothing more than that. Those among them who are still alive cannot get over it to this day. But, as has been said before, let us leave the digressions. I had to return home. The time came for Duni, the false prince of Mecht and the phony Duke of Sintra, to demand his inheritance. I hadn't forgotten about the prophecy, however. I had to return with Ciri, and Calanthe was keeping a weather eye on me. She never trusted you. I know. I think she knew something about that prediction, and would have done anything to hamper me, and in Sintra I was in her power. It was clear I had to return to Nilfgaard, but in a way that no one could guess that I was Duni and Ciri was my daughter. Vilgefortz suggested a way. Duni, Pavetta, and their child had to die, vanish without trace. In a staged shipwreck. That's right. During the voyage from Skellige to Sintra, Vilgefortz was to pull the ship into a magical whirlpool over the Sedna abyss. Pavetta, Ciri, and I were supposed to have previously locked ourselves in a specially secured lifeboat and survive, and the crew were meant not to survive, finished the Witcher. And that's how your ruthless path began. Emir var Emrys said nothing for some time. It began earlier, he finally said, and his voice was soft. Regrettably. At the moment, it turned out Ciri wasn't on board. Geralt raised his eyebrows. Unfortunately, I hadn't appreciated Pavetta in my planning. The Emperor's face didn't express anything. That melancholy wench with her permanently lowered eyes had seen through me and my plans. She had sent the child ashore in secret before the anchor was weighed. I fell into a fury, as she did. She had an attack of hysteria. During the struggle, she fell overboard. Before I could dive after her, Vilgefortz had drawn the ship into his maelstrom. I hit my head against something and lost consciousness. I survived by a miracle, entangled in the ropes. I came to, covered in bandages. I had a broken arm. I wonder how a man feels after murdering his wife, the Witcher said coldly. Lousy, replied Emir without delay. I felt, and I feel lousy and bloody shabby. Even the fact that I never loved her doesn't change that. The end justifies the means, yet I sincerely do regret her death. I didn't want it or plan it. Pavetta died by accident. You're lying, Geralt said dryly. And that doesn't befit an emperor. Pavetta could not live. She had unmasked you and would never have let you do what you wanted to do to Ciri. She would have lived, Emir retorted. Somewhere. Far away. There are enough castles. Don Rowan, for instance. I couldn't have killed her. Even for an end that was justified by the means. One can always find a less drastic means. The Emperor wiped his face. There are always plenty of them. Not always, said the Witcher, looking him in the eyes. Emir avoided his gaze. That's exactly what I thought, Geralt said, nodding. Finish your story. Time's passing. Calanthe guarded little Ciri like the apple of her eye. I couldn't even have dreamed of kidnapping her. My relations with Vilgefortz had cooled considerably, and I still had the dislike of other mages. But my military men and aristocracy were urging me hard towards war, towards an attack on Sintra. They vouched that the people were demanding it, that the people wanted living space, that listening to the Vox Populi would be a kind of imperial test. I decided to kill two birds with one stone, by capturing both Sintra and Ciri in one go. You know the rest. I do. Geralt nodded. Thank you for the conversation, Dooney. I'm grateful that you are willing to devote your time to me. But I cannot delay any longer. I am very tired. I watched the death of my friends who followed me here to the end of the world. They came to rescue your daughter, not even knowing her. Apart from Kair, none of them even knew Ciri. But they came here to rescue her, for there was something in her that was decent and noble. And what happened? They found death. I consider that unjust, and if anyone wants to know, I don't agree with it. Because a story where the decent ones die and the scoundrels live and carry on doing what they want is full of shit. I don't have any more strength, Emperor. Summon your men. Witcher, the secret has to die with those who know it. You said it yourself. You don't have a choice. It's not true that you have plenty of them. I'll escape from any prison. I'll take Ciri from you. There's no price I wouldn't pay to take her away, as you well know. I do. You can let Yennefer live. She doesn't know the secret. She would pay any price to rescue Ciri, Emir said gravely, and avenge your death. True. The Witcher nodded. Indeed. I'd forgotten how much she loves Ciri. You're right, Dooney. Well, you can't run from destiny. I have a request. Yes? Let me say goodbye to them both. Then I'll be at your disposal. Emir stood by the window, staring at the mountain peaks. I cannot decline you, but don't worry. I won't tell Ciri anything. I'd be harming her by telling her who you are, and I couldn't harm her. Emir said nothing for a long time, still turned towards the window. Perhaps I do have a debt to you. He turned on his heel. So hear what I will offer you in payment. Long, long ago, in former times, when people still had honor, pride, and dignity, when they valued their word and were only afraid of shame, it happened that persons of honor, when sentenced to death and to escape the shameful hand of the executioner, would enter a bath of hot water and open their veins. Is it possible?
Order the bath filled.
Is it possible, the emperor calmly continued, that Yennefer might wish to accompany you in that bath?
I'm almost certain of it. But you must ask. She has quite a rebellious nature.
I know. Yennefer agreed at once. The circle is closed, she added, looking down at her wrists. The serpent Ouroboros has sunk its teeth into its own tail. I don't understand, Ciri hissed like an infuriated cat. I don't understand why I have to go with him. Where to? What for? Daughter, Yennefer said softly. This and no other is your destiny. Understand that it simply can't be otherwise. And you? Our destiny awaits us. Yennefer looked at Geralt. This is the way it has to be. Come here, my daughter. Hug me tightly. They want to murder you, don't they? I don't agree. I've only just got you back. It's not fair. He who lives by the sword, Emir var Emrys said softly, dies by the sword. They fought against me and lost, but they lost with dignity. Ciri was standing before him in 3 strides, and Geralt silently sucked in air. He heard Yennefer's gasp. Damn it, he thought. Everybody can see it. All his black uniformed army can see what can't be hidden. The same posture, the same sparkling eyes, the same grimace. Arms crossed on the chest identically. Fortunately, extremely fortunately, she inherited her ashen hair from her mother. But anyhow, when you scrutinize them, it's clear whose blood... But you won, said Ciri, glaring at him passionately. You won! And do you think it was with dignity? Emir var Emrys didn't reply. He just smiled, eyeing the girl with a clearly contented gaze. Ciri clenched her teeth. So many have died. So many people have died because of all this. Did they lose with dignity? Is death dignified? Only a beast could think like that. Though I looked on death from close up, it wasn't possible to turn me into a beast, and it won't be possible. He didn't answer. He looked at her, and it seemed he was drinking her in with his gaze. I know what you're plotting, she hissed. Know what you want to do with me. And I'll tell you right now, I won't let you touch me. And if you... I'll kill you, even tied up. When you fall asleep, I'll tear your throat out with my teeth. With a rapid gesture, the Imperator quietened the rumble gathering among the officers surrounding them. What is destined shall be, he drawled, not taking his eyes off Ciri. Say goodbye to your friends, Cirilla, Fiona, Ellen, Rhiannon. Ciri looked at the Witcher. Geralt shook his head. The girl sighed. She and Yennefer hugged and whispered for a long time. Then Ciri went closer to Geralt. Pity, she said quietly. Things were looking more promising. Much more. They hugged each other. Be brave. He won't have me, she whispered. Don't worry. I'll escape from him. I have a way. You may not kill him. Remember, Ciri? You may not. Don't worry. I wasn't thinking about killing at all. You know, Geralt, I've had enough of killing. There's been too much of it.
too much. Farewell, Witcher girl.
Farewell, Witcher.
Just don't cry.
Easier said than done.
Emir var Empress, Imperator of Nilfgaard, accompanied Yennefer and Geralt all the way to the bathroom, almost to the edge of a large marble pool full of steaming, fragrant water. Farewell, he said. You don't have to hurry. I'm going, but I'm leaving people here who I shall instruct, and to whom I shall issue orders. When you're ready, just call, and a lieutenant will give you a knife. But I repeat, you don't have to hurry.
We appreciate your favor.
Yennefer nodded gravely.
Your Imperial Majesty.
Yes.
Please, as far as possible, don't harm my daughter. I wouldn't want to die with the thought that she's crying.
Emir was silent for a long time. A very long time, leaning against a window with his head turned away. Madame Yennefer, he finally answered, and his face was very strange. You may be certain I shall not harm your and Witcher Geralt's daughter. I've trampled human bodies and danced on the barrows of my foes, and I thought I was capable of anything. But what you suspect me of, I simply wouldn't be capable of doing. I know it now. So I thank you both. Farewell. He went out, quietly closing the door behind him. Geralt sighed. Shall we undress? He glanced at the steaming pool. The thought that they'll haul me out of here as a naked corpse doesn't especially delight me.
And, can you believe it? To me, it's all the same.
Yennefer threw off her slippers and unfastened her dress with swift movements.
Even if it's my last bath, I'm not going to bathe in my clothes.
She pulled her blouse over her head and entered the pool, energetically splashing water around.
Well, Geralt, why are you standing there like a statue?
I'd forgotten how beautiful you are.
You forget easily. Come on, into the water.
When he sat down beside her, she immediately threw her arms around his neck. He kissed her, stroking her waist above and below the water. Is it, he asked for form's sake, an appropriate time?
Any time,
she muttered, putting a hand under the water and touching him.
Is the right time for this. Emir repeated twice that we don't have to hurry. What would you prefer to spend doing during the last minutes given to you? Weeping and wailing? That's undignified, isn't it? Examining your conscience? That's banal and stupid, isn't it?
That's not what I meant.
So what did you mean?
The cuts will be painful if the water cools down, he murmured, caressing her breasts.
It's worth paying in pain.
Yennefer put her other hand in the water.
For pleasure. Are you afraid of pain?
No.
Neither am I. Sit on the edge of the pool. I love you, but I'm not bloody going to do it underwater. Oh my,
said Yennefer, tilting her head back so that her hair, damp from the steam, spread over the edge like little black vipers.
Oh my. Oh.
I love you, Yen.
I love you, Geralt.
It's time. We'll call them.
We'll call them.
They called. First the Witcher called, and then Yennefer called. Then, not having heard any reaction, they yelled in unison. Now! We're ready! Give us that knife! Hey, damn it! The water's cooling down. Get out of there, said Ciri, peeping into the bathroom. They've all gone. What? I'm telling you, they've all gone. Apart from us three, there isn't a living soul here. Get dressed. You look awfully funny in the nude. As they were dressing, their hands began to tremble. Both Geralt's and Yennefer's. They had great difficulty coping with the hooks and eyes, clasps and buttons. Ciri was jabbering away. They rode away, just like that. All of them. As many as there were of them. They took everyone from here, mounted the horses and rode away as fast as they could. Didn't they leave anybody? Nobody at all? That's staggering, whispered Geralt. It's staggering. Has anything happened? Yennefer cleared her throat. To explain it? No, Ciri quickly replied. Nothing. She was lying. At first, she put on a brave front. Erect, with head haughtily raised and stony-faced, she pushed away the gloved hands of the black-cloaked knights, looking boldly and defiantly at the menacing nose-guards and visors of their helmets. They didn't touch her any longer, particularly since they were stopped from doing so by the growl of an officer, a broad-shouldered soldier with silver braid and a white heron feather plume. She walked towards the exit, escorted on both sides, with her head proudly raised. Heavy boots studded, mail shirts clanked and weapons jingled. After a dozen paces, she looked back for the first time. After the next few, the second time. Why, I'll never ever see them again. The thought flashed with terrifying and cool clarity beneath her crown. Neither Geralt nor Yennefer. Never. That awareness immediately, all at once, wiped away the mask of feigned courage. Ciri's face contorted and grimaced, her eyes filled with tears and her nose ran. The girl fought with all her strength, but in vain. A wave of tears breached the dam of pretense. The Nilfgaardians with salamanders on their cloaks looked at her in silence and amazement. Some of them had seen her on the bloody staircase. All of them had seen her in conversation with the Emperor. The Witcher girl with a sword, the unvanquished Witcher girl arrogantly challenging the Imperator to his face. And now they were surprised to see a snivelling, sobbing child. She was aware of it. Their eyes burned her like fire, pricked her like pins. She fought, but ineffectively. The more powerfully she held back her tears, the more powerfully they exploded. She slowed down and then stopped. The escort also stopped, but only for a moment. On the growling command of an officer, iron hands grasped her by the upper arms and wrists. Ciri, sobbing and swallowing back tears, looked back for the last time. Then they dragged her. She didn't resist, but sobbed louder and more despairingly. They were stopped by Emperor Emir va Emrys, that dark-haired man with a face which awoke strange, vague memories in her. They released her when he gave a curt order. Ciri sniffed and wiped her eyes with her sleeve. Seeing him approaching, she stopped sobbing and raised her head haughtily. But now, she was aware of it, it just looked ridiculous. Emir looked at her for a long while, without a word. Then he approached her and held out a hand. Ciri, who always reacted to gestures like that by pulling away involuntarily, now, to her great amazement, didn't react. To her even greater amazement, she found his touch wasn't unpleasant at all. He touched her hair as though counting the snow-white streaks. He touched her cheek disfigured by the scar. Then he hugged her and stroked her head and back. And she, overwhelmed by weeping, let him, although she held her arms as stiffly as a scarecrow. It's a strange thing, destiny, she heard him whisper. Farewell, my daughter. What did he say? Ciri's face grimaced slightly. He said, Varfail, Luned. In the elder speech, farewell, girl. I know. Yennefer nodded. What then? Then he let me go. Turned around and walked away. He shouted some orders and everybody went. They passed me, utterly indifferently, with stamping, thudding, and the clanking of armour echoing down the corridor. They mounted their horses and rode away. I heard the neighing and tramping of hooves. I'll never understand that. For if I were to wonder, Ciri, what? Don't wonder about it. Stiggar Castle, repeated Philippa Eilhart, looking at Fringilla Vigo from under her eyelashes. Fringilla didn't blush. During the past 3 months, she had managed to manufacture a magical cream which made the blood vessels contract. Thanks to the cream, she didn't blush, no matter how embarrassed she was. Vilgefortz's hideout was in Stiggar Castle, confirmed Azirava Anahid. In Ebbing, above a mountain lake, whose name my informer, a simple soldier, was unable to recall. You said, was, Francesca Finderbear observed. Was, Philippa interrupted in mid-sentence, because Vilgefortz is dead, my dear ladies. He and his accomplices, the entire gang, are no more. That favour was done for us by no other than our good friend the Witcher, Geralt of Rivia, whom we didn't appreciate. None of us, about whom we were mistaken. All of us. Some of us less seriously, others more. All the sorceresses looked at Fringilla in unison, but the cream really did act effectively. Azirava Anahid sighed. Philippa tapped her hand on the table. Although the multitude of activities connected to the war and the preparations for the peace negotiations excuse us, she said dryly, we ought to admit that the fact of being thoroughly outmanoeuvred in the case of Vilgefortz is a defeat for the Lodge. That must never happen to us again, my dear ladies. The Lodge, with the exception of the ashen-pale Fringilla Vigo, nodded. Right now, continued Philippa, the Witcher Geralt is somewhere in Ebbing, along with Yennefer and Ciri, whom he freed. We ought to ponder over how to find them. And that castle? Sabrina Glevisig interrupted. Haven't you forgotten something, Philippa? No, I haven't. The legend, if it should arise, ought to have a single, faithful version. Thus, I'd like to ask you to do it, Sabrina. Take Kira and Triss with you. Sort out the matter, so that no trace remains. The roar of the explosion was heard as far away as Mecht, and the flash, since it took place at night, was visible even in Matina and Jesu. The series of further tectonic shocks were perceptible even further away, at the remotest ends of the world. Congreve, Estella or Stella, the daughter of Baron Otto de Congreve, espoused to the Count of Liddittal, managed his estates extremely judiciously following his early death, owing to which she amassed a considerable fortune. Enjoying the great estimation of Emperor Emir var Emrys, QV, she was a greatly important personage at his court. Although she held no position, it was known that the emperor was always in the habit of gracing her voice and opinion with his attention and consideration. Owing to her great affection for the young Empress Cyrilla Fiona, see also, whom she loved like her own daughter, she was jokingly called the Empress Mother. Having survived both the Emperor and the Empress, she died in 1331, and her immense estate was left in her will to distant relatives, a side branch of the Lidditalls called the White Lidditalls. They, however, being careless and giddy-headed people, utterly squandered it. Effenberg and Talbot, Encyclopaedia Maxima Mundi, Volume 3.